the blue and the white. I was like, okay.
Oh, my Vanguard chamber's painted up in this jersey color, so.
Ah.
And then all my lords were painted up in the black and the white and the red, or black, red, yellow, whatever was the last string.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul, and welcome to the Stormkeep. Today we are going to be talking about how to collect a Stormcast army, and we are joined by our first Knight-Guestor, Anthony, the AOS Coach. How you doing, buddy?
G'day, and apologies to all of the Vindictors out there. It's not the. I just want to make this formal apology. I'm one of the content creators that said Vindicators, and I just want to apologize again on behalf of us creators who added an extra A.
It's wild just how present that typo is, because you think people should know the word vindictive. I don't know. When you're in this community, when you're a Games Workshop customer, I feel like people would know the word vindictive. It seems to just come up.
How dare I not know you got 80 War Scrolls?
I know. There's too many ors. Something or.
Age of Something has a great video on that.
Yes. Shout out to Age of Something.
Yeah.
Fantastic video. How you guys doing in the chat?
Yeah.
All right. So today we're talking about how to start collecting a Stormcast army. Not as much as we normally focus on gameplay type things. We won't be talking about that, obviously. But today we're more focused on the hobby side of things. We're talking about how to start collecting the army in particular, because we get a lot of questions from our Discord server asking, oh, I got the Dominion box. What should I get next? Should I get this unit? Or, we get a lot of people coming to us and saying, oh, I bought, 10 Vanquishers. Is that a mistake? I feel bad now, all kinds of things like that. So kind of just wanted to have a roundtable discussion. No formal data crunching, really. This is all just gut feeling, whatever you feel like doing, and general advice. So this is a little less structured, and that's okay. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. So I guess we should start the discussion off by talking about how each of us got into Stormcast. Where we started off, what our first purchases were, and we'll try to see who it's not going to be James, but we'll see who the oldest Stormcast player in here is. And we'll start with you, Anthony. Lead us off. How did you get into Stormcast? What really appealed to you about them?
Oh, I'm glad I prepared this earlier without even knowing you were going to do this. So I'm an old school Warhammer Fantasy Battles player. I played well back into 3rd edition, and I played the Empire, which is where Sigmar came from, and united the barbarian tribes to ultimately create the greatest faction in time and space. And when the old world destroyed, and Age of Sigmar was launched, there was that core box. The 4th of January, 4th of July, you go into Games Workshop to pick up that box for, I think, the 11th of July, and it came with Stormcast. And I had a real love-hate relationship with Stormcast because, as an Empire man, I'm like, I like my humans, I like my farms. Tell me about the farmers and the peasants. And I one of my first purchases was that box that I started using as allies. Wasn't quite committed to Stormcast. It wasn't my first army. But I started playing with allies, whether it was the what did I ally with? There was a whole bunch of allies. I've used like the Knight-Guestor, I've used prosecutors, I've used Griffhounds. Back in the day, you could take Griffhounds as ones.
Yeah.
So I'd take like three little Griffhounds and run these little dogs around the table.
Yeah,
I miss that. It was so cool. You'd have like three, you'd have like 3 doggos running around, and you had the what was it? The Excelsior Priest with his little hammer from Warhammer Quest. But anyway, I've been a non-Stormcast player, but a Stormcast player throughout the entire Age of Sigmar. I just haven't known it. And I think maybe one of the things that's happened recently is I've actually committed to the book, and I'm now actually going to play the faction as opposed to bringing them in as allies to the other order factions.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Morgan, how about you? When did you start with Stormcast?
I want to say 2.5 to 3 years ago. I was mostly playing Magic at the time, and I walked into the fantasy. Warhammer was something I always wanted to get into, but I never really found the crowd or like how to get into it. And they had a sale going on, I think, for Halloween, and it was the Khorne versus Stormcast box that was on sale.
Yeah.
That basically had like all the initial like Vandus Hammerhand and all those units versus all the Khorne units And I had a friend who wanted to buy the corn side and who really wanted to get into the game. So I was like, okay, perfect. We can pick up this box for half price. And then it was just like off. I started talking to people online. I started talking to people in the shop. Bought my first can of Retributor armor. Bought my first Cantor Blue. My first Lead Belcher. And yeah, that was one of the best nights. That was one of the busiest nights I had, just clipping models, spraying them right there. And like an idiot, I didn't open my window, so my house smelled like Retributor armor spray. So not a good idea. Don't do that, guys. And yes, and I've basically, I know like for me, like the aesthetic of, I really like that they have that sort of somewhere between a Roman and a Norse aesthetic going on. Like they're an army of Thors, but they have very like Roman organization, and I don't know, that was just wonderful to me.
Yeah, I've always liked that. That's what got me into them was just I looked at them and I saw Roman gladiators with Art Deco wings, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And they're all paladins, and then they added like ranger paladins and wizard paladins, and I love it. Fantastic. James, how about you, man? When did you start your Stormcast journey?
So I started my Stormcast journey earlier this year in February, the same time that I started my journey into Age of Sigmar. I remember having lunch with Paul one day and just asking him about, hey, tell me about Age of Sigmar. I know when we lived together, you played it a lot. Do you still play it? Eventually, his advice was really just pick an army that you think looks cool and then go from there. My whole plan was with things happening in the world right now, I just needed something to hold myself over, and I just wanted to pick a painting. So I just picked some models that look cool. I bought both Start Collecting boxes with the hopes that, prosecutors look like a really fun model to paint. So let's do that. And then from there, Paul started shaping me into what our buddy calls a stiletto of a player. And yeah, I started accumulating a lot of Stormcast over the year, and I think I'm up to like 13 to 15,000 points of Stormcast.
That's insane for 1 year, man. Absolutely insane. Yep.
And you didn't even get the Nurgle treatment to go from 1,000 points to 10,000 points with one book update.
Nope.
Yeah. No, James, you did have to suffer through the tail end of second edition, where Stormcast were unarguably at their worst they've ever been. And I just remember teaching you games in my basement and being like, okay, so this is how the army plays. And they look super durable, but they are just not. They are paper thin. They're just going to crumble and die. And the best you can do is throw units away and shoot stuff while you do it. And
that's all I remember about second edition. And quite honestly, third edition makes it feel a lot different. And I'm more aware of how our army plays in third edition. So,
yeah. For myself, I started playing Stormcast. I didn't initially like them when they first came out. I wasn't really playing Warhammer Fantasy at the time. I kind of had like a passing interest in it as a kid. I get an Empire box here and there. Shout out to Empire Coach. Birds of a feather, man. I always liked the Empire. I always liked Lizardmen. And then I heard rumors of this Warhammer Fantasy End Times thing, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I kind of paid tertiary attention to it. And I remember back in 2015, I remember looking online one day, and I'm like, oh, they blew up the world. And here's this army of same-looking dudes, all painted the same color, and they just look terrible. And they killed the Warhammer world for this? Like, this is awful. And
sorry to interrupt you, Paul, but I do remember specifically driving back home from work one day, and you were trying to get me into Age of Sigmar, telling me about the rules. I was just like, nah, not my thing.
Yep. That was about 6 months later. I decided to just buy Lizardmen because I really like Lizardmen. I always did. And I just bought a box and I started painting them. And then I played a game on my coffee table with my buddy Pat, and the rules were just good. They were clean and simple, and you didn't have all these, because Pat tried so many times to get me into Warhammer Fantasy. He had a whole bunch of armies, and the game was just way too complicated. Like, it was the rule book, the rules themselves were so thick, and I'm like, I'm never gonna figure this out, right? Plus, I was a student at the time, didn't have a lot of time or money, so whatever. Always liked the models, never could get into it. And then 2016, I had some Lizardmen, and they came out with those battle forces for Stormcast. And the whole time I was playing Lizardmen, I was looking at these Stormcast guys. I'm like, I really didn't like them at first, but the more I see them, especially when I see them in colors other than gold, they start to look really, really good. There's a lot of cool armor trim on these guys that just makes the layered armor look really good. Now, that said, I do like Thunderstrike more than the old armor, but I really like the old armor too. So that kind of I started looking into it. I started reading the book. I think the model that won me over was the Knight Heraldor. Ultimately, I saw that guy and I was like, So hold on, they just have a dude blow a horn, and that's like a hero you can bring to the field. It's not a unit champion or anything. It's just like a full-fledged hero that they have, and that for some reason that was the thing that pushed me over the edge. I ended up getting the Battle Force and a whole bunch of boxes, and it's been growing since 2016, and the backlog continues.
See, I've got to be really honest here. Like, I always started with allies, and I mentioned earlier, like I'm a Cities of Sigmar player. You can go back to I went over to England to play on Blood and Glory, and I played on a tournament on Warhammer TV, and I was running the Empire or Cities of Sigmar before Cities of Sigmar, and like Stormcast to me were always like these allies that were kind of forced down my throat. But what really got me started into actually playing an army as opposed to bringing in, the competitive goodness is the new armor. I'm going to be honest, the dragons got me. The minute I saw dragons, I knew they were my next army. I didn't care how many points they were. I didn't care how many dollars they were. I was getting dragons, and I've got Krondus, I've got Karazai, I've literally got both of them already, and I don't care. But the new armor and the new lore really has got me on side. I didn't like the force-fed kind of lore initially. I hated the idea of these golden boys coming down and, imposing their will and like clearing the mortal realms. I'm like, no, let my Free Guild Guard defend the realms as well. I don't need a hero. It's not Bonnie Tyler's, track here. But then kind of they've really gotten a lot of depth to their character over the last, I think, since Soul Wars to me. Since Soul Wars, they've got some real character. You've got Gardas has come in. You've got leading up to Soul Wars, there was a little narrative session you guys might remember called Malign Portents.
Yep.
And I'll never forget the story that there was this father and son living out in the middle of Whoop Whoop, and they were a little bit sick. And I think the dad was tendering to the child. And what we find out later on is they had Nurgle's rot. But the Stormcast arrived. This one particular Stormcast arrives to the house. And they think, yay, he's my savior. But actually, the Stormcast are there to kill the person because they know that this is going to turn them into a plague bearer. And it was that moment where I kind of realized that Stormcasts aren't good. Yeah. They're not the be all and end all. They've got shades of grey and like I think I was listening to one of the Hallowed Knight series or whatever it might be, and like hearing Gardas and hearing like some like the lore has gotten really interesting to me lately, and I think they've done a really good job just not to like, hey, here's the Golden Warriors that kind of reclaim the realm gates.
Yeah, I remember reading.
Actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay.
They're not hollow, but they're not lawful nice. That's my piece.
Yeah. Lawful good, not lawful nice. I remember that
really
story.
Like the reforging aspect.
Yeah.
Go for it, Paul. Yeah, go ahead.
I remember that exact story you're referencing. I really like that one because it takes the perspective of the farmer taking care of his sick son, and it never ever gives away that he has anything other than just like a typical cold. Right, this is a regular dude, and this is a regular sickness that he's probably seen 1,000 times in his life, and he's bunkered down because there's chaos warriors all around the area that are ravaging towns, and he thinks the person knocking on the door is his salvation, and then he opens it, and he describes the Stormcast as like it's like an ivory demon or something. Like it's all negative connotation as soon as he sees him, and it doesn't like you kind of infer that the Stormcast is there to kill him because he has Nurgle's Rod. It's a really well-presented story. But there's another one where I don't remember which storm host. I think it was also the Knights Excelsior, but they go into a town that's just been ravaged by disease. And I think this is Knights Excelsior. And they go into this town, and the chief or something comes up to them and says like, "Oh, thank you for coming. We're so glad you're here." And the leader, I think it's a Liberator Prime, looks around and just tells the other Liberator to close the door behind him. And that's where the story ends. Like, it's just shades of gray all day.
Well, there's another one that kind of really got me, which was there's a book called The Cities of Secrets, which is Excelsius, and there's a particular story, and they talk about like the Free Guild Guard who are like defending the city, and the captain at the time makes an off comment saying that the Stormcast always come in and steal the glory of like the farmers and the troops who are doing the hard work, and I think it's those types of little things that gave me the character that I was really missing. I think I kind of initially, saw them as like, the Space Marine, no personality, force it down my throat, but over time they've really evolved it, and I'm really excited, and I guess that's why I'm here today to talk a bit more about why I'm jumping onto Stormcast now.
Yep, they're a fantastic army from a hobby standpoint. The lore has definitely gotten a lot better. It's not just golden dudes living forever, fighting demons forever. It's a lot more nuanced than that. It's a lot more interesting, especially once you leave the Hammers of Sigmar and you start going into the other ones. Like, if you guys have checked out what's going on in the realm of metal with the Celestial Vindicators there, it is crazy. That is some crazy stuff that is happening there. If you read Broken Realms, you'll know they have this like fortress inside a Quicksilver volcano, and the city's been purged like 5 times because it keeps getting corrupted by chaos cultists. They kill like 3/4 of the population every single time they do a purge. It's insane, but that just causes everybody to double down on their faith, and they get even more relentless and zealous. It's nuts. So yeah, like you said, James, lawful nice. They are not lawful nice. They're lawful good, lawful do whatever it takes, which is sweet. So we've talked about where we all went into it, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this live stream is to give advice to people who are either getting into it or thinking about getting into it. And so, like, starting today, if you were to start Stormcast today, what should you pick up? And I think easily the most obvious choice is one of the 3 starter boxes, or 4 starter boxes, I guess, technically. So those are Dominion, there's the Warrior box, the Harbinger box, and the Extremist box. So Dominion, to me, seems like the most obvious choice. It does have the highest price point, and it was technically a limited run, but there's so many copies of it out there. I think this video, you could watch this like a year or 2 from now, and you'd still be able to find Dominion on the shelves. It's pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys looked at the other boxes, though? Because I know we're all pretty big collectors here, but have you guys taken a look at what's included in the other boxes?
I own Extremists.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked at them. I think they're really good as a starter because they include, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they include painting tools too, some of them. Or like tools to start building. Am I wrong about this?
I think there is a separate little kit. There is a little kit that you can get that has a couple guys.
That's a separate kit.
Yeah.
I think Extremists, I think it's good because if you want to start playing, because sometimes people just don't have like terrain, it gives you like everything needed to play the game right there.
That would actually
it gives you half. It gives you half the terrain from the Gurish pack. It's like the whole fort with 2 statues. They give you half of them, so you get 1 statue and a whole bunch of terrain. It's quite cool. It's a really good box.
It is a good value box. Yeah, it doesn't have the same like model count as Dominion, but it's a good place to start if you just want to. You don't care which you play, Cruel Boys or Stormcast. Just a couple models here and there and pieces of terrain. Yeah,
Can I add one more thing to the list?
Sure.
This is probably specialized to some countries, not all countries, but a great way to get started is this little thing called the Mortal Realms magazine. So it's for Australia. I know in England, in France and Spain. I think it's coming to America soon, but it's a monthly magazine and you get miniatures like, there's, Knight-Guestor, and you get paints and brushes, and it's a very low cost to entry. I guess if I'm thinking about someone getting started for the first time, they might not want to drop all the cash for Dominion. And there are easy ways to get started. Games Workshop, if you have a Warhammer store, will often have a free Liberator or
miniature of the month.
Yeah.
Or free,
correct. Is it
free Vindictor now? Free Space Marine or Vindictor if you want to start.
Correct. So if you just want to get started and you don't want to ruin your first model, you don't want to drop a lot of cash, there's a lot of really cheap entries, or there's a lot of people who have bought the Dominion box for Cruel Boys that are happy to steal this Stormcast. So there's you don't have to drop a lot of cash to get started if you want to put your foot in the pond and just dip your toes.
Alternatively, you can do what Stark Pister is suggesting in the chat and just buy 8 boxes of Dracoths. Nice and easy, that magazine's fantastic. It slipped my mind because we're in Canada, it just doesn't exist. It's not a thing, and the cost of buying the models individually on eBay, you just eat so much in shipping, it just doesn't end up being worth it. But yeah, if you are in a country that has good shipping and has a trade deal with the UK, then feel free to get that magazine. It's a fantastic way to start. Definitely.
Yeah.
I know most.
I would also like to, say the Dominion box. If you obviously if you can buy it at the start and you want to split it with a friend, go for it. But there's plenty of eBay vendors doing either the Stormcast or the Cruel Boys half for, I would want to say, $60 to $70, which is about like half the price of the box. So you don't have to like buy the whole box and look for someone to sell it to.
Definitely, yep. It's such a common box. Some people suggested that they made too many. Some people suggested it just wasn't that popular. Regardless of the reason, it's really good for consumers. So if you're getting into it, it's a fantastic, fantastic deal. You get a ton of models in Dominion, and you get a good mix of stuff too. You get some elite dudes, some basic dudes, some cool centerpieces. Yndrasta is a really, really fun model to use. Not in the most competitive games, but she's just got great rules all around. She's not bad at anything, which is it's a good way.
I'll make one more suggestion, and there's a bit of a left ball kind of curve. Is there's a bunch of the easy to build boxes. So if you are new to Warhammer and tabletop and you don't know where to start, or it's like, it's a big stretch to go from video games to Warhammer, maybe grabbing one of the easy to build kits just to get started. It's cheap, you can make mistakes, you learn the hobby, then you can go into some more of the finer kits, like Yndrasta, for example. Maybe you don't want to paint Yndrasta first, you want to just practice on something that's a lot easier and generic.
Yeah. Definitely. Like Mergonk, you were suggesting that smaller, or not suggesting, but you mentioned the smaller kit that's got a couple models, a couple paints, and clippers and a brush, I think.
Yes, clippers.
Yeah.
Sometimes, 2 brushes, clippers. You'll have to buy the knife separately, and at least I want to say all the base paints and 1 shade.
I would even recommend that for anybody getting into Warhammer, even if you have no interest in Stormcast at all. That's just a nice little box to show, hey, do I actually like this hobby? Do I care about building models, cleaning them, putting them together, and then spray painting them and doing everything? Like, do I actually want to do this? Because if, I always tell people, if you want to get into Warhammer for the gaming aspect of it, just find something else to do. It's a fun game, right? But if you are looking just for the game, there is a lot more satisfying experiences that you can find. The fun of Warhammer is getting models, building them, painting them, talking to other people who've done the same thing, and then sometimes also playing a game with them. That's like the whole hobby is what you got to be interested in. I think a lot of people are just going to get disappointed if they come into it just for the gaming aspect of it. So, I think the Mortal Realms magazine is a great way to go. If you can. The easy build kits are also a really nice way to flesh out a couple models here and there. I think a lot of people are going to get into it with Dominion or one of these starter boxes here. Of those, Dominion I think is definitely the best one. The Warrior box, it's like a really low price point. But if you're at that price point, you could probably just get something else. Like, it feels like you just don't get enough out of the Warrior box, whereas the Harbinger box actually gives you a relevant hero that you're going to use later. It gives you an elite unit and a battle line unit. So that one feels a little bit better. And then if you want to take one step further, add some terrain on with Extremis, I think that's a good way to go. One of those 3. I wouldn't personally recommend the Warrior box. I feel like you just don't get enough out of it.
Yeah, I think it's literally those. I don't think those boxes are. I think, like Coach pointed out, I think they're meant for more for mileage. Like, how far do you want to commit your dollars towards a new hobby? So it's like, if you know for sure you're getting to Warhammer, you're like, how do I start a Stormcast army? That is my intention. Definitely go for Extremis and Dominion. But if you're dipping your toes into the hobby and you're like, I just want some models to paint and move around the board, how do I feel about this? I think that's really what Warriors for.
And I made a video, not a Stormcast video, but it was just more of a generic video on, how to start the game. And, I broke it down into 4 quadrants and said, you've got to consider price, you've got to consider painting, you've got to consider flexibility and simplicity, right? So when I was thinking about painting, if I'm new to the hobby, if I am not a miniature painter, jumping into some of these really detailed kits, I mentioned Yndrasta earlier, but even something like from the Soul Wars box, they're a little bit more detailed than your generic Liberator. So start with something and build up your skill. If you are looking at price points, and there's a lot of cheap ways to get into the hobby. Buy it from secondhand people, buy it from Splitter Box, and then think about the flexibility and the simplicity. How detailed are the rules that you want to get into, or even how flexible the army is, or the is it specific? Is it one hero in one particular build? Like, do you take Gardas in Hammers of Sigmar? Probably not. So, like you might look for some things that are flexible first, like your libs, like your prosecutors, like something that your annihilators that can jump into any type of list. So that's how I would think about getting started.
Yeah, well, that segues very nicely into the next part. So let's say this hypothetical player walks into the store, and the very generous, or generous isn't the right word, the very kind Games Workshop employee pushes a Dominion box on them, right? They walk out of the store with a Dominion box, or let's say a Harbinger box. What would you guys suggest would be the next steps? Because for me, I would definitely, if you really want to get into Stormcast, I think you got to go for the bundle boxes, right? There's 2 different Start Collecting boxes that we have, and we also have the Soul Wars box, and all 3 of those are just a ton of models for a good price point, let's say. Not all the models are necessarily really useful, but there's a ton of them, right? Like you can't go, like Sequitors I think are overcosted, but they're still dudes you can put on the table. You can start playing a 2,000 point game if you just get a couple of these boxes together.
Yeah.
In particular,
I think Soul Wars. Yes, Soul Wars is, I think Soul Wars, in my opinion, is a very good box because it has some key units, especially what I really don't like about Soul Wars, though, and the only I like it as a box because the units, I think Sacrosanct Chamber looks extremely good. And, if you're if you move past the beginner Liberator painting Sequitors is an absolute joy. I don't like the numbers in the Soul Wars box at all.
Yeah.
I think it's very non-friendly. Like you have 8 Sequitors and 3 Evocators, and now you can't run like the full unit. You guess you can run 5 Sequitors and be happy with that. But you can't run a full unit of 2 Sequitors. Yeah, and you can't run 3 Evocators because their min size is 5. So,
I honestly forgot about that. It's been so long.
Yeah.
And then you have the I want to say the Incanter, the Arcanum, and a Celestar Ballista and 3 Castigators. So that's good because the Incanter's good, the Arcanum's fine. He's not the most competitive, but he's fine. He's a wizard. You get some artillery, you get some shooters, but man, I would not recommend Soul Wars for someone looking to play a matched play game. If you're just looking for just, hey, I want to paint some models, get into open play, unit sizes don't matter. Who cares? Just play with your friend. But for match play, don't buy Soul Wars, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Soul Wars, quite honestly, to me, on reflection, is more of a collector's box. Thunderstrike Brotherhood. When I bought my second box, I had to realize that there's a lot of key units and models in there that have been staples for the Stormkeep podcast, quite frankly. It's the only way you can get a Lord Relictor in a kit right now, other than going to eBay. You get 10 Liberators just off the bat. Now, they aren't the greatest Liberator models, but quite frankly, it's a good start.
Yeah,
and
Liberators are always good. And I think I want to say 3 Prosecutors and 3 Retributors. The Retributors tick me off, but they're from a time when Retributors were, I guess, came in sizes of 3, or the size didn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, you can definitely find 2 Retributors pretty easily to round out the squad. For a long time, they had these
or you could buy 2. You could buy 2 Thunderstrike Brothers.
You could, yeah. 2 Relictors is good. Prosecutors continue to surprise me and how often I like using them in competitive lists. So having 2 squads of that isn't bad. You'd get 20 Liberators, 2 Relictors, and you could just proxy Vandus as a regular Dracoth, so that would also give you a squad of Dracoths. That's 2 Thunderstrike Brotherhood. I like that idea. So let's say expanding from that concept, because we could also mention all the various second edition boxes that they put out that are like Warrior, Harbinger, Extremist, but they've been out of production for so long. I think they're rare enough at this point, and they have wonky unit sizes. I don't think they're worth discussion anymore. I think the same thing will happen with Warrior, Harbinger, and Extremist once we go into 4th edition. Whenever that happens, they're going to phase all this stuff out, and people won't be able to find it anymore. So building off that, though, let's say you pick up 1 Thunderstrike Brotherhood and you've got a Dominion. What specific units do you like? That's enough points to play a game, by the way. A full 2,000 point game, I believe Dominion plus Thunderstrike is 2,000 points. Not an optimized list, but it is legal. You've got enough battle line in there between the 2 Liberators and Vindictors. You've got some pretty good choices in there. But where would you go from there, right? Like we talk about a lot of staples in our list. We talk about Dracoths. We talk about the Storm Drake. But I think, what are your guys' opinions? What would you recommend to a new player who just has those 2 boxes?
Pick up some shooting, quite frankly.
Same. I would say, well, first, what I really like asking people is what do you find more fun? Do you find, because I start out the question by, do you like Magic and do you like control or do you like aggression? and they're like, what's your play style? And if they say, I don't care, then I'm like, well, pick up some shooting units. Or if they say control, I say shooting units. If they like, being aggressive and, just like bashing people with hammers, I'm like, well, pick up some annihilators, Throwing hammers. Or I recommend any one of the hammer units, typically the cheapest one, because players, like when I tell them you have to buy this $100 dragon, they don't want to drop $100 right away, but you tell them to buy maybe a box of annihilators, that's $40, and they're like, okay, sure, I'll pick that.
Now, some people may just see the dragons and say, oh, I can run this.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. I'm not buying any of the other stuff. Just give me the dragons.
Oh no, but then their question becomes, hey, I really want to run this dragon. Can you send me a list? Or like, can you recommend what else to take with this dragon?
Yeah, how many dragons should I...
You know what you want.
What number of dragons is enough dragons? That's the question for that type of person. So that person, they're good. They don't need our advice. They know what they're doing. I would definitely second the suggestion of picking up shooting. I think one of the things that Stormcast are best at is shooting, but it's not obvious whenever you look at the starter kit models. It's always some kind of chaff melee unit, some kind of elite melee unit, maybe something with a little bit of speed and some heroes. They never really include a lot of shooting. Soul Wars was really the only one that did, but Castigators were so bad in 2nd edition, and Ballistas really fell out of favor too. So I definitely think picking up Judicators, I would highly, highly suggest picking up Judicators. They're excellent. They fill battle line. They have good damage, good wounds as well. And if you want to get a little more fancy, if you feel like you've got the ropes a little bit, I would say Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows are an excellent buy. They come with Aether Wings too, so that's a lot of points in one box. Easy to fill out your army that way.
And it's probably really good value. I think it's like 3 Aether Wings and 3 Vanguard Raptors for $30 or $32 retail. And
surprisingly cheap.
Yeah, that box is surprisingly cheap. Yeah.
See, I would. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here and say something completely against what you've said. I would say stop.
Okay.
I'd say stop, pause, read your book, find a concept, build around it. I think Stormcast being such a big army, it's not Ironjaws. It's not you've got 20 odd models to choose from. You can build around everything. It's such a deep rabbit hole with so many different heroes and so many different units and a lot of units that play similar roles. I think you can find yourself going down a deep rabbit hole very quickly. And for the experienced player, doesn't matter. You can find yourself out. You're wise enough, being in the hobby for long enough to be able to work through it. But as a new person picking up Stormcast, I would say look at your book, look at your storm hosts and your sub factions, find yourself a hero, find yourself a keyword, and start thinking about what works better. Is it if you want to be grabbing a dragon, you want to get yourself a monster, play down that route. If you're looking for some shooting or you love magic and you want to build around something else, I think for me, what's driving me and building my army is a concept. And then the decision tree starts to kind of build out. Otherwise, I get into a trap of, do I build long strikes or crossbows or your Judicators, or am I doing like a million questions? As a new person to Stormcast, I might not have the answer for it. And then I might feel like I've made dumb purchases or poor purchases.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation.
Definitely. That's going to segue very nicely. You make segues so easy, man. This is great. I'm so bad at segues normally. It's like, all right, we're talking and let's talk about this instead. But that... And
if I could just add one
Sure.
more. And the reason I say that is because I'm not trying to flex here, but I've been here since the start. When I started Age of Sigmar, Liberators were the strongest unit in the game. A Knight, a Zeros would drop down from the sky. You teleport, 30 Liberators into my backfield, ignoring coherency, into combat, and they were OP. Then there were times where Evocators were the absolute, monsters. You had Prosecutors annoying the crap out of people. There was a time where Star Drakes were one of the most OP things in the game because there wasn't a lot of mortal wounds to handle a 2-up, re-rolling 1s, bounce mortal wounds off. And I guess what I'm trying to say is the game evolves so quickly that what your models that you've got will come back into fashion. What old becomes new. What's not good now will become good. What's good now will become crap at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So find a concept and find things that you like, as opposed to meta chasing early in your journey. I think early in your journey, if your goal is to go 5-0, different story.
Yep. Now, what's the old saying? Rules are temporary, cool models are forever. So just pick stuff you like. That's more important than anything else, right? Like I'm super stoked that a lot of my favorites in this edition are really good, but I had these models kicking around in the case over here for years. They never got out, and I was disappointed, but I still liked them. I never regretted getting them. I never regretted building them, painting them. Anytime I would play them in a game, I knew I was doing something that wasn't optimal, but that's fine. I like the models, so that was all I needed.
And
And
somebody
that
in
is
the chat's
actually
making a
why
really
I'm very comfortable. Yeah, go ahead, no, Coach, go ahead.
no, please continue.
No, so the reason I'm actually very comfortable, I totally agree with what you said. You know, you should, models are forever, pick that. And that's actually the reason why I feel very comfortable recommending either Judicators or Vanguard Raptors. Like Paul mentioned, they're not in a lot of start collecting, in start collecting or like starter boxes. They do round out your collection. There's a unit that typically isn't seen in a lot of the start collecting roster, which are mostly knights bashing peoples with hammers and melee weapons. So it rounds out your collection nicely. You can go for the ones you like the look of, and like you said, yeah, go through the book, look at the concept. Do you like being aggressive in their face with crossbows? Do you like that, or maybe you like shooting them from afar? That's entirely up to you. Those rules could very easily change tomorrow. But yeah, like one of the particular reasons I'm okay recommending Judicators or Vanguard Raptors to people is because it's not a unit that they can easily find. They have to like specifically go out and buy it.
And they're tried and tested. Like they've done well for
Mhm.
years, so we're confident in that recommendation. And I think just call out Stark in the chat, made a good comment. If you have a friend who plays Stormcast as well, you can always borrow some of their models if they're okay with it to test out some other armies or test out some other ideas before you make that purchase. So that you can always do that before you commit your hobby dollar.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Everybody's got some Stormcast lying around. Yeah, I wanted to mention some quick combos here, building off what you were saying, Coach, with just ideas, things to put together, right? Like I just wanted to mention offhand some really quick combos. I've got later in the discussion here, we're going to be talking about more themes that you can focus an army around, but these are just quick unit combos. If somebody's looking for like a quick, like, oh, what units should I get? Here's some really simple combos that we really enjoy using. First up, the Lord Imperator with Annihilators. That's tried and true. If you've played Dominion, you know how strong that is. Being able to deploy your Annihilators more than 7 inches away from an enemy, and then doing a bunch of mortal wounds when you land, and doing a bunch of mortal wounds when you charge, and being able to re-roll the charge, and then doing a bunch of damage when you finish the charge. It's great. It's just a great combo. That's a fantastic combo. Lord Relictor with 15 Judicators, that's another really good one, because the Judicators, whichever type you want to use, if you want to use the bows or the crossbows, having a Lord Relictor to teleport the unit into the correct firing position is a great combo. So that's a lot of fun to use. Not so fun to play against. So just know your audience, right? If you're going to use that, just make sure that your opponent is okay with that amount of firepower. You could go the other direction. You could go melee, focus on big blobs of dudes. So you could get 15 Vindictors and tie them together with Vanda's Hammerhand, who's going to give them all a bonus attack every single turn. So that's also a fun little combo that you can do, and hopefully that gets better after the FAQ that may or may not ever come out. And then the last one I would really recommend for new players would be Bastion and Dracothian Guard. So Bastion really likes playing by himself, and he can issue command abilities anywhere on the table. And because you have to play Hammers of Sigmar to make the most out of Bastion, you can also bring Dracoths as your battle line. So you kind of start putting the pieces together, and this makes a really simple army that's highly powered. It's really high powered, has good defenses, decent mobility, decent shooting. Like you can make an army that's just Dracoths and Bastion and feel pretty good about that. And we will later be talking about how to magnetize the Dracoths in particular. So stay tuned for that.
Quick question to all three of you then. How do I get a Lord Relictor given that it was locked into the original box and it's very hard? Do you have, all three of you, do you have any advice on where somebody could get a Lord Relictor, make a Lord Relictor that would be tournament, accepted? Any advice here? Because again, I'm thinking of a new player who gets started, who may not know where to find them or build them or what to do. If we keep talking Lord Relictor, Lord Relictor, Lord Relictor.
If you're just playing for fun, quite frankly, just use the Knight Relictor as a proxy right now.
That's the simplest way, yeah.
I've seen people who bought the Knight Vexillor kit, and they'll build him with the flag, or they'll build him with the Stormbringer pennant, which is, I'm talking about the $30 Knight Vexillor kit. And whatever banner you didn't use, put it on the Knight Relictor. Like, personally, like I've seen kit bashes with the Knight Relictor with the Storm pendant on him, and it's like, oh, that's a Lord Relictor. Just give him a skull mask.
Yep.
Boom.
You can definitely find them on some websites, depending on the stock. I know there was a big run on the Lord Relictor after the Battle Tome came out. Everybody realized how good it was going to be, and stock went out. But I think some websites are starting to restock that particular model because he was part of the Mortal Realms magazines. There was one issue that just had a Lord Relictor, and that is by far the best way to get it. So if you can get that magazine, if you can find that issue that has that model, that's definitely the easiest way to do it. Failing that, I wouldn't buy the Thunderstrike box just for the Relictor. That doesn't seem like a good use of your money. I would probably just kit bash a Knight Relictor instead.
The other one I would say
Yeah,
is
also-
a lot of your bits traders like eBay, as well as other. There's a lot of bits traders out there. I'm not going to name drop their names, but they'll often sell parts, whether it's models or individual bits separately. So you can always. That's how I got mine. I just got it off eBay at a fair price. I wouldn't pay an exorbitant amount for a model.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I have a distinct memory that for a short time, Vandus was available in a box by himself, and the Lord Relictor was available in a box by himself. They had him labeled
Vandus
as.
Was the Relictor wasn't.
I just remember seeing
Vandus
the box that said Ionis Cryptborn on it, and it had the Relictor, and maybe that was a dream, but I'm pretty sure it was real. I remember thinking it was weird at the time that they bothered cutting up the start collecting box into like $40 hero kits. I thought that was very weird, but I could be misremembering it.
No, I don't think that's a box. I know the Vandus Hammerhand has a box because I have a box of Vandus Hammerhand. Like that's how I got him. I never bought the Thunderstrike one.
Okay,
The Lord Relictor I think I got off of a friend for like $10 or something.
it's a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so another topic we didn't really reach is how big of an army exactly do you start with, right, Coach? This is building what you were saying earlier was to pick a point and then stop, right? Like we talked about which units are good to get, but really the first thing you got to do is besides picking what models you actually like, you got to figure out, well, how committed am I to this actual hobby? Like how big of an army do I want to get? Do I want to start with 1,000 points? Do I want to build that up to 2,000? Do I want to jump into 2,000 points right away? Do I want something in the middle, or do I want to just buy the entire collection all at once, like some of us have done? Personally, I would recommend 1,000-point army as your starting point because you pretty much get it with Dominion. If you get the Dominion box, or if you get Extremists and a couple things on the side, then you've got your 1,000-point army right there, and then you can figure out if this game is really as fun as you think it is, right? And it is a fun game. I don't want to disparage it, but it's a big investment, right? Before you spend more money, you should actually play the game, see if it's enjoyable, and if not, maybe just focus on the hobby side of things, right? You don't have to play the game in order to enjoy Warhammer. So when you're building 1,000-point army, you generally want some mix of melee and ranged, I think, and some small heroes on the side, right? You don't want to just go, here's 30 Vindictors and that's my army. You're not going to have a lot of fun, and you're not going to experience all there is in the game. So what you want to do is you want to pick one shooting unit, pick one melee unit, and pick some heroes that you like. That's what I would recommend. Alternatively, the lowest cost way to do it is just to get Dominion and take Andrasta out. I think that's about 1,000 points right there, and it gives you a more or less balanced army that you can have a couple of games with.
Mm-hmm.
So then building up from 1,000 points, you want to add another battle line unit. So this is where units of Liberators or Sequitors or even Vanquishers would come in. You can add to existing units by reinforcing them, or you can just add new units to your army entirely. And like we mentioned the unit combos before, I think it's generally a good idea to try to find at least one combo in your army that you're going to have fun with, because Age of Sigmar is a game all about combos. If you're not using units to be greater than the sum of their parts, then you're not getting the most out of the game. If you're just moving stuff forward into the middle of the battlefield and you're just fighting stuff in a tar pit, it's not a very satisfying game to do it that way. Focusing on combos, focusing on strategy, I think that's where the enjoyment will come from. But what about 1,500-point armies? A lot of people talk about these. Do you guys have any experience playing that particular size, or with people who enjoy discussing it? Because my focus is pretty much 2,000-point games, right? That's where I'm at. So this is a blind spot for me.
It's an interesting question because I actually don't. I'm more recently. I mean, I think 1,000 points for beginners is a fine thing because games at those level, especially for people who are just into the hobby, they tend to be casual, so they're somewhat balanced. I actually like the 1500 point mark, or like 1250 even, because it's you get that slight more leeway to start putting in more stuff than just your hero and 2 battle line. And the games, and I like always, I've been a part of like some slow grow leagues, and so having that 500 to 1000 to 1500 to 2000, I think is a good way to get people towards a 2000 point army without telling them, hey, here's all this stuff you got to buy. You can sort of take your time with it. So yeah, but 1500 point armies, yeah, I think the concept is much the same as 2000 point. Just get another battle line unit and then buy like, I don't know, like a hammer unit, like a paladin or something, and you're good to go, right?
You make a good point, Magog, and I want to call that out. Is 1500 points are really cool to play, but it's hard to play a 1500 point because a lot of people don't want to play you at 1500 points. My experience is a lot of the Warhammer Games Workshop type stores that are smaller in space compared to your FLGS, they will often go into that 1500, 1700, 1200 points because of the size restriction and the amount of people they can have in the room. If you build up to a 1500 point, know that you might have to proxy or you might have to negotiate with somebody to play a game. It's just that awkward kind of space. But you mentioned something a little bit earlier, and that is Path to Glory. It's a slow grow campaign, and it's what was I going to say? There's often other things like the Tale of Four Warlords or New Year, New Army, where you and your mates build an army over time, so you're all kind of progressing at the same level at the same points. If you have other people who want to play 1500 points, I'd highly recommend it. But if you rock up to your local friendly game store and say, "Oh, who wants a 1500 point game?" you might find that people either say, "Give me 1000" or "Give me 2000." It's this weird spot that it's not that people don't want to play, it's just this awkwardness. And most people are like focused on the 2000 point match play games if you are not playing with your close circle of friends.
I think part of that is because Games Workshop doesn't actually recognize 1500 points as a legal size in the General's Handbook. I think they do in the core rules, but not in the General's Handbook, which is very peculiar. So you start having to ask these questions like, oh, how many battle lines should I have? How many monsters can I bring? How many artillery? It's just because it's not clearly defined, you have to have more conversations with people, and that just starts to add a tax or like a burden that you have to overcome in order to play this game mode. And people don't want that. They want to show up. It's like a Thursday night. Oh, I'm going to go to the game store. I'm going to bring a 2000 point army because it's really easy to just find somebody else who did the same thing. And having more conversations is it's not good for pickup games, right? I think 1500 points is a really interesting place to have in terms of game size because you can it's really broken. There's so many. All the combos that are broken at 2000 points are even more broken at 1000 points and 1500, right? Like playing against 6 raptors that are shooting you twice on the first turn, you don't come back from that in a 1000 point game. It's just not fun to be on either side of it.
Imagine I run two mega gargants at 1000 points.
I was gonna say that one on Amulet of Destiny, the other one rerolling saves.
I think you can straight up run one mega gargant and still win. Like just leave 500 points off the table and still do pretty well at 1000 points. Like it's not.
No. Yeah, but that's the thing. Like it's the 2 combo armies that are really good against each other, and then absolutely awful for everyone else to play in the field.
Yeah, it's not a focus for them to make sure that that's a fun format. You can tell their focus is on 2000 points, and that's fine, right? But it's hard to get up to that point right initially. It's easier to start out with smaller games, smaller skirmish style games, and I think like what you're saying, Path to Glory is a good way to do that, especially because it's not a necessarily competitive focused environment, right? If you're just learning the game and you just want to know, there's, especially with 3rd edition, the rules are so complex compared to 2nd edition. I just want to move my dudes. I want to learn how to use command abilities. Probably won't even use the terrain rules because that's like more complexity that's just building on itself, and you don't want to deal with all that. So Path to Glory is a really good way to just have, like, if you're Stormcast, 3 models on the table, 3 different units. That's all you get at 600 points, and then build up. The only issue I have with that, it's not universally good. Like you have to coordinate it with other players. It's not well suited to go at your own pace with the hobby. Like depending on your pace, maybe Path to Glory is too fast or too slow, right? Maybe you want to just jump in and get 2,000 points and go start playing pitch battles right away. Maybe other people want to get that 600 points, paint all of it, and at their schedule, maybe that's going to take them a month. Maybe that's going to take them 2 months. And then the problem is that other players might not want to take that amount of time, right? Because everybody's got different commitments. With people have families and jobs, and this is a hobby. It's not. You shouldn't be committing that much time necessarily, right? You've got other things going on. So there's pros and cons to Path to Glory as a way of going into the game. I think the 4 Warlords is probably my favorite one. You find some buddies, and some of them could be more experienced even, right? Like if the 4 of us did it, or let's say the 3 of us, and we found a 4th player who's just getting into the game. A 4 Warlords type thing is really cool because it gives other players an opportunity to play an army they wouldn't normally get. And it's not a big commitment either, because you never know when this whole thing's going to fall apart. You could start with, 500 points, pick up a start collecting box and paint some stuff you haven't done before. Show people how to play the game, introduce them to the rules one step at a time. That's a good way to do it. And it also, community is a big part of it, right? So if you can start an army and build a community and teach people at the same time, that's just win on all brackets.
That what you there is the key. Sorry, James.
Yeah, I was just going to build on that and just say, get involved with your FLGS. When 3rd edition launched, Paul and my local store here, shout out to Torchlight, had an escalation league where they started 750 points in the first round, went up to 1,000, then 1,500, then finished off with 2,000. Super easy way to learn the game and just help you build lists at that point as well.
And just to explain, I was going to clarify for anyone who doesn't know what a Tale of 4 Warlords is. And it's not restricted to 4 people. It's just a name that it's been around in Games Workshop White Dwarf since the dawn of time. But it was a concept where 4 players would come together and they would set themselves a budget, $50, $100, whatever it might be. And you incrementally over 6 months build up to a 2,000 point army. But you're restricted. So $100, I buy a box, a hero. Any money I don't spend last month, I can accumulate to get a big box the next month. And the goal is to paint that unit or whatever you buy within the month. So it's a fun motivator, but more importantly to what everyone has said already, it's about that community spirit of coming together and chatting and motivating and discussing and the big goal at the end.
Yeah, especially these days with things going on, it feels like there's a longing for more social interaction. And I think, frankly, I think a lot of people, you just tell them like, hey, this is an excuse for us to hang out on a Saturday. I'm in, that's it. Like, don't care what we're doing. We could, let's buy some plastic and spend all our day building and painting it. That's fine. The social aspect of it is such a big one. I think a lot of people are really
For me,
enjoying
it's the
that.
biggest motivator. Yeah. For me, it's the biggest motivator because when I find myself in a rut where I don't feel like building, don't feel like playing, all I need to do is, pop down to the shop, watch a pickup game, go see it, go maybe like take the models I have to a tournament. I see people's armies, I see people talking about it. That makes me want to immediately go home, start building and painting. And yeah, I think that's the community aspect of it is very important.
Well, here's some shameless promotion for you, gents. I noticed in your Discord server, you've been doing a lot of hobby hangouts. And I think that's a great way, whether it is your, the Stormkeep, whether it is your local community, setting yourself, every week at 8 p.m. on a Monday, let's all jump onto a Discord call and let's all hobby together and we can talk shop and we can talk about other things. But it's that community element while I'm building and painting. And you might not be able to physically go to your local store or you might not know as many people, but through Discord and through other communities like that, you can grow and still have that spirit. Because I know there are some people who live in small towns that they might only be a couple of players locally and they've got to travel to events.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to James for doing that. That's pretty great, actually.
And James, when are those hobby hangouts again?
Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern. Saturday mornings for me at 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. So plus 5 hours for the European crowd. And then can't remember Saturday evening zone. It's to 1, right? Eastern?
Yeah, 9 to 1 Eastern.
9 to 1 Eastern. Yeah.
We do that one just for Australians. All right. So the last thing I want to mention on this slide, the question, should I buy the entire range of models up front? Decisively no. Do not buy I've done this. I have done this with other armies. All right, I bought like 6,000 points of Fire Slayers, and I regret it to this day because most of it is sitting right over there in that box. And one of these days, I swear I will paint it, but I won't. I know I won't. Don't buy the whole army. It seems like a good idea, especially if you find it secondhand off somebody on a resale site, like a marketplace site. Do not overcommit to this hobby. Do not overcommit to an army, even if you love that army, right? Buy stuff as you need it. Paint stuff before you buy more stuff. And everybody is going to hear that, and they're going to go out and buy more stuff than they can paint anyway. But that's okay. That's how you learn. And then you'll tell someone else, and they'll do the same thing. So it's a perpetuating.
We've
cycle.
all got that's Paul's referring to the newcomers in this hobby. It's called everyone's pile of shame. Everyone's gray pile of shame. We've all got one. We've all had one.
It's a pile of potential, but it's overwhelming. Is why we would suggest you not to buy the whole range, because you look at your big lots of plastic, and while it's great to own all these models, it's overwhelming because you've got to build them, paint them, and it seems like a mountain too hard to climb, and you'll burn yourself out. So incremental purchases over time, reward yourself as you go. Even like buy your troops before you buy all the heroes. Like I know you probably want to get Krondus and Karazai first, but once you've painted them and you've built up your skill, you'll realize you probably could have done a better job now that you've kind of built up that ability and you understand it a bit more. And now you're sitting there kind of painting Liberators, and while they're cool models, there's certainly no Krondus.
Yep.
I actually really like that. Yeah, because I made that mistake when I first started this hobby. I think I started around, I want to say around when Soul Wars was about to come out. I picked up the Toleron and I started painting it, and it was not, my first paint job was not very good. And so I had to teach myself to, because I also had the Thunderstrike box, and start painting Liberators. Just paint your simple battle line, build up your skill, and then when you'll feel more confident, and you'll actually see yourself improving after each Liberator. By the time you get to your favorite centerpiece model, it's gonna shine, and you're gonna really enjoy it.
And then like 6 months later, you're gonna go back to that centerpiece model and think, oh, I did such a terrible job on this. Why did I think this was good?
I sold it and bought another one.
The urge.
You learn so, but you learn so much. Like when you start painting Stormcast and you start painting like Thunderstrike armor, you learn where the contours are. You know the best angles to start hitting. Whether it's dry brushing or edge highlighting. You understand not to glue the head on the armor. You paint the head separately, and you learn all these little tricks as you go. And then you rush through your favorite heroes, and while that's cool, you do regret it. You're like, I could have done a better job if I saved it up towards the end. So that's probably the other piece.
Yep. And then you get into a cycle of rebuying models you've already painted, and the backlog grows because it's like harder to justify painting a model you've already painted. And it just, like there's a reason you can find good deals for Warhammer. You find whole armies at a time listed. It's because people fall into this trap, right? They bite off more than they can chew, and they sell off their pile of shame, and that's great. Like you can buy another person's pile of shame. Just make sure it's not adding to your own pile. Make sure that 2 years later you're not going to be the one selling it again. Okay, definitely, so let's talk about. I wanted to do a different slide first, but we're on it, so we'll do it. So casual versus competitive game. So I make it no secret that my focus is on 2,000 point pitch battles. That's not the only way to enjoy the game. That's not the only way I enjoy the game. Frankly, I think it's a lot more fun when you play it casually. You mess around. You don't bring optimal stuff. You don't bring the strongest combo you can just because you can. I think that's a way more fun way of playing the game. And first edition was great for that, especially because you could handicap yourself as well. Going a little off topic here. So let's talk about thematic armies versus tournament armies, right? So Coach, what you were saying earlier really resonates with me, in that you pick a concept and you build around that, right? And that's what I would call a thematic army, right? It's like, I like these models, I like this particular subfaction because reason. It doesn't have to be because they have good rules, because they're pointed well, whatever reason you think of, right? Like I'll constantly reference my love of chariots, and I want to build an army with 4 chariots in it. I don't care how I make it work. I just want 4 of them because they're cool, and that's enough for that. Is that a good tournament army though? No, probably not. Probably not a good tournament army. But that's fine.
See, right? I would challenge you on that. I would challenge you right there, because what is a tournament army? And I think there's when you break down a tournament army, for a lot of people who go to a tournament, and I really want to break down the stigma here. People think tournaments are these big win at all costs, cutthroat. If you see like an old person, I'm going to push them down the stairs, that type of build. But for most people, you're just going to an event, playing with your war dollies for 2 days, and hanging out with cool people like you.
Oh yeah,
There is probably there's 10% of people who want to win the event, and in Age of Sigmar, the prizes aren't that big. You're not going to be going pro, and you're not winning $1 million. It's not Magic the Gathering. So when you say tournament army, if you want to run the chariots, absolutely you could as a tournament army, but you've got that understanding of what's my potential of winning all of my games, or why am I going to the tournament. So I just want to clarify that if you want to run chariots, you do you.
Right.
You can build a good list.
I also want to add, like, GTs are not the only tournaments. Tournaments are plenty. You will find tournaments at the Games Workshop store, at your local LGS. You have these 3-game tournaments. And these are not people who are bringing just the highest S-tier cutthroat list. These are people who are just, maybe putting a bit more extra power. So if in a casual game they're bringing, I don't know, 3, just Liberators and maybe 1 unit of Retributors, maybe they'll bring another unit of Retributors. So if you take that 3-chariot list, or you take some funny concept, you could come out of left field and do 2-1 or 3-0 really easily. Like it's not impossible. Well, it's very probable.
And I know you weren't referring to that, but I wanted to just clarify it because someone might have a thematic idea and they're like, oh, it's not one of the tournament lists. Well, you can go to a tournament with an army and do the best you can with what you've got if you're enjoying it.
Yeah, it depends on what you want to get out of it, right? If your goal is to take first place, that's a very different goal than to try to do as well as you can with the units that you like, right? So I phrased it in this way to be misleading on purpose, because I feel like there is a stigma between like narrative fluffy lists. It almost sounds like an insult to call a list fluffy, right? To use the units that you care about and to write stories for them, it almost feels like people use it as a pejorative, but it's not, right? Part of the fun is optimizing, at least for me, optimizing whatever concept you have, right? Like if I wanted to use Celestin Prime, I could make a killer Celestin Prime list. Is it gonna 5-0 at every GT? Maybe not, but I could make the best version using him as the core concept, right? So tournament armies are, I would say, you're trying to win. That's the goal, right? At the cost of everything else, that is the goal with your list, is to be as powerful as possible, have the best matchups possible, try to take the best general. That's the goal of a tournament army. Whereas a thematic army is something more like, okay, I like picking Tempest Lords, and I'm going to try to fit as many flying units in there as possible. I'm going to use Prosecutors. They're going to be my forward units. I'm going to have some Drakes behind them, and maybe I'll even bring like a Wizard who's going to cast a Levitate spell on another unit. Like Krondys. Krondys can't. But let's pretend we had good Wizards who could cast Levitate regularly. You could start fitting them into that concept. Let's say you wanted to build a Stormkeep list that's like shield wall after shield wall after shield wall, and then you bring in some cities with Sigmar artillery to sit behind it and pepper the enemy, and like you're trying to defend a castle, right? That's the kind of thing I would differentiate between thematic and tournament, right? I don't like the idea that just because you're optimizing, that inherently makes it a tournament army, and just because you're using good units, like just because you have Raptors doesn't mean it's a tournament army. They're a very strong unit and they're a staple in tournament armies, but you could be using them for thematic purposes, right? So yeah. I think another big thing to discuss is, like, do you play at home or do you play pickup games at a store, right? If you're just playing at home, like if you're playing with your son or your daughter or your wife, or you just have friends coming over and hanging out in your basement, that's going to create a very different kind of atmosphere in gaming than if you were to go to a store that has 3 or 4 regulars and you guys are all good friends and maybe you go out for a drink afterwards at the pub right next door. And that's a little different. And then, do you play at a bigger store? Are there maybe 20 people who show up for a game night regularly? Like, all of these are very different environments, and it's something you got to consider when you think about what you want your hobby experience to be. So when I started playing Warhammer, it was really small pickup games at Games Workshop. I would just go there with whatever Lizardmen I had painted at the time, and I think the first event I ever went to was before they had points in the game. We just had like a war scroll limit, so you could pick 5 war scrolls, and they could be anything, right? So I picked what I thought was good at the time. I picked Lord Croak, I picked a Bastiladon, and I picked like some other nonsense. I don't even remember. And my first game, and I thought I was like a boss, right? Like, oh, look at this thing. This is going to be good. My first game was against 4 high elf dragons in a battalion. And it was wild. Like I was going in there and like having little tiny skirmishes, and then I go to an event at the same store, and it just completely different experience, right? So I think that's definitely something people got to consider when they think about their hobby. Like, what are you actually trying to get out of it? If you're not trying to be a 5.0 GT player with your name on the what ranking system do we even use? Whatever.
BCP.
Depends on which country and where you are.
Yeah. If you're not trying to be on top of the ranking system, if that's not your focus, like if that happens, cool. But if you're not trying to do it, then why do you concern yourself with it, right? You can just focus on the things that you enjoy in the hobby. Playing pickup games is a legitimate way to that could be everything for you. You don't have to go to events.
I'd also tell you to set your expectations. If you're picking up Stormcast for the first time and you pick up, I know you've got net lists on here. You know, if I've seen a really good player do well, and you know they went 5-0 or they went 3-0 at an event, you can't just buy their list and expect the same results. You know, the list doesn't get you performance. It's the micro decisions. It's the way that you play that's going to ultimately get you a good result. There's been plenty of stories already in AOS 3 where a good player with a bad army has still generated a good result, which is why I kind of challenged you at the start to say you could still do it with chariots. Now, is it optimized? Is it tailored to be the best list and the most value you can get out of your 2,000 points? Probably not. And that's part of the challenge with, say, the Soul Wars stuff. Is I think a lot of people, and I think your podcast included, you've mentioned that's probably not the best value for points. You know, if you're trying to really optimize, you'd go Liberators, you'd go something else. But you can still do well. I think that's the key, right? Like, find your army, find your concept, and remember, at a tournament, it's usually only one person that goes 5-0. Like, everyone else is going to lose at some point. So for most people, their goal is just to win more than they lose, which would be 3 wins, 2 losses at a 2-day event.
Yeah, I think a realistic expectation for somebody at their first event is to just finish the event. Don't leave early. Don't get discouraged. Just sit through it and have fun. Because you know, you might have a really bad first game. You might find some really power player. Like you said, only about 10% of the players at tournaments are actually trying to win. Everybody else is like just a dad or a college kid who's got the weekend off, who wants to just hang out and roll dice. Like that's definitely been my experience at tournaments. Is most people are not there trying to win. They are just there to spend the Saturday or Sunday or whatever day. And you know, maybe it's your first event and you happen to get a bad roll in seeding and you find some guy who's going to table you to turn 1, right? Fine, whatever. Don't leave early. It sounds silly, but I know people who have done this and they regret it. I know people who have it's just a shock to the system. You know, you think you understand what you're doing, and this player just completely wipes you out before you even have a chance to move your models. It's really discouraging. So the first goal, I would say, if you're attending an event, is just finish the event. That's an accomplishment in and of itself. Just meet people, talk to people, and socialize, right? From there, you can work up to say, okay, well, I've lost 3 games. Let's try winning 1 game at my next event. That should be the next goal, right? Go 1-2, and then from there, try to go a little bit better. Go 2-1. And that's good enough, honestly. You don't need to try to win all 3 games every single time you go to an event. But if you are playing at events, we could definitely have a little discussion about this, because a lot of people ask, well, where do you find events? How do I actually start going to this stuff? I'm interested in this sort of thing. I want to enjoy the social aspects of it. I want to try enjoying the competitive aspects of it. I want to try to win. I want to try to just play against other players. How do I start? What do I do? So how do you guys find events? What's your avenue for looking for places and events to play at?
Keep up with my local game stores, see what they're doing on their websites, their socials, that kind of thing. Word of mouth.
Yeah, in my experience, word of mouth is definitely the big one. Go to your local game store and like the community, just making more friends in this hobby, whether it's online or through meeting them in person at the local game store is so important, because that's really, you're going to be organizing tournaments with these guys. These are the guys you're most likely going to be playing with. So if you're talking about Warhammer, you're talking about tournaments, that's going to be an obvious point in conversation. When that happens, and obviously now that GW's open up their events again, Warhammer community is a good spot. And there's a few Twitter accounts that I learned to follow. Most particularly, I want to say it's Dan_AOS Shorts. He posts a lot about upcoming tournaments across the United Kingdom, Europe, USA. So that's a good resource to just know what tournaments are out there, and see where you can go and where they are and whether you have the means to get there.
Yeah, the AOS Shorts would be a good one I would call out, because they've also developed a calendar as well, so you can kind of see what's coming up. Very similar to James as well. You're in Australia, especially. I can't speak for all other communities, but where I live, a lot of our events and our communication is happening through Facebook. So we have local scenes as well as our national Facebook group. And a lot of the tournament organizers will post in advance when tickets are going on sale. And we've actually even created an Australian calendar. So as events get announced, you can kind of start to see when and where. And, if you're willing to travel, or if you're just looking for some of those locals. Alternatively, Twitter, Warhammer Weekly, I know, announces a lot of them. Just get yourself involved in the community, and you'll find them.
Andy in the chat asks, most tournaments have tight time limits. How do you know you're ready for your first one? That's an interesting question. Because when you're learning the game, you're taking your time, right? Round one is like 3 hours of the game. You're deploying, you're trying to figure out, you're referencing rules constantly. My advice would definitely be play at your own pace. Don't worry about going too fast. If you feel like you're going to hit the time clock, that's fine. You're going to get faster. You won't have to reference things constantly. You'll get quicker with the rules. I really would not concern yourself with the time. Age of Sigmar is not such a cutthroat game that people are going to bring chess clocks and time you out. People are very friendly and they're very welcoming. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. But if you feel like you're playing really slowly, that's definitely something to work on. Do you guys have any tips on how to get quicker at playing?
Play more. Play as much as you can, quite frankly. Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, and the Stormcast. A lot of rules, man. A lot of rules to remember. The only way I found out to sort of get good at that, or at being able to increase my pace, was just playing more and more games. I remember my first games with you, Paul, lasted about 5 hours, right?
That was a long Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say that Age of Sigmar, despite being way less complex than Warhammer Fantasy was, it's still, like, at the end of the day, Warhammer is just a more complex game than what people are used to. And I think a way to like sort of speed up your play is to play more games. There'll come a time where after maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, however many games, you're just not looking at your battle tome as much, because you just know what everything does. And that's when like, the more you realize that you're using your battle tome less and less, or referencing to it less and less, you'll know you've reached that point. That being said, unless you're at the top tables in like the top 8 cut at LVO or something, don't worry about time all that much. It's not that important. Like, people aren't gonna like yell at you at tournaments for referencing something in a book. It's not something that's like taboo or anything like that. I've generally seen games go maybe a couple battle rounds, 3 battle rounds, and both players have these huge armies with lots of models to move and lots of decisions to make, and it ends in a draw, or like it ends with whoever has the higher points at the time. And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be like, it's not like, oh, I have to finish 5 battle rounds in the allotted time. There's no overarching pressure like that, I think. So I think unless you're like really at top and people are using chess clocks, I think you're fine.
So my advice to you is, when do you know if you are ready for a tournament? The answer is now. A tournament and signing up to a tournament is a great deadline. If you are somebody who needs to paint your army, you need to learn to play the game, and there is a tournament coming up in a few months' time, boom, sign up, and you've got yourself a goal. You now need to paint every day to get your army painted. You need to practice every week and maybe get multiple games in to make sure that you feel confident. I would call out AOS Reminders, which is a free website. You can get a paid subscription, and that gives you a lot of benefits. But the key thing it does is that you can enter all your war scrolls and all your rules, and it will spit out a couple of cheat sheet pages by phase. So in the hero phase, it'll tell me these are the spells that I can cast, this ability for this particular hero, this type of unit. At the start of the movement phase, I can do this. At the end of the movement phase. So it's a good little kind of guide. So you're not like constantly flicking through your battle tome and constantly jumping between pages. The other one I would say to you is pick armies and pick models that are less complex. So maybe you start as a Stormkeep, not a Science of the Storm, because you're walking up the board as opposed to, who do I put into reserve and when and where. And so try to find the simplicity in your army. And then as you build up with your experience, then build in the complexities of the army. So everyone's on their own journey. You guys have nailed it. No one's going to yell at you, but there is an expectation that you are completing your games. So consider practice and making sure you get a couple of games in. And probably the other piece of advice that I give to some of the people that I coach is don't chop and change your army. When you chop and change your army too often, like you're adding models and removing models because you're not happy with them, you don't get into the rhythm that you guys are talking about. So you need to learn them, and if you can get some repetition with the same list, you'll refer to your book less.
Yeah, Stormcast in particular are a really good army for not having slow play, because we have small unit sizes generally. The biggest unit we have is 15 models, right? Nothing gets above that, and we don't have to end up using movement trays. That's definitely something I would recommend. If you're playing an army with lots and lots and lots of models like Soulblight Gravelords, or if you have a bunch of Witch Elves, if you want to be courteous, it might be a good idea to use some movement trays just for yourself too. And it's just a good idea. You can easily get them 3D printed. Lots of places have them. I think Games Workshop makes some too that are okay. They're good enough.
They made some for Apocalypse. I'm not sure if they still sell them, but yeah, they might have them. Yeah.
The other one as well is something that's been really helpful for other people, including myself, is to draw up your deployment, draw out your deployment and your ideal deployment. Because I find a lot of time is wasted trying to work out where do I put my models and where do I build the synergies. And if you can draw out a couple little maps and say that in the ideal situation, I've got my Vindictors here and there's this hero that supports them, and I'm going to put the dragon on the flank, and you start drawing that out, when you actually get to the table, it just becomes really quick.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I think I can't believe I never actually noticed it, but yes, for newer players, I would say deployment definitely takes a lot of the time, because there's a lot of decision making. You want to figure out where your units want to go, where your elite stuff wants to go, where your heroes wants to go, and mapping that out in your mind or maybe on a piece of paper, have it. I think that's a good idea. Like pre-planning deployment.
If you've built your 2,000 point list with synergies in mind, I'm going to have the Knight-Draconis with my Stormdrake Guard. Cool. We'll just draw a little map that shows you, would you have your Stormdrake Guard at the front or the Draconis, or would it be 12 inches difference, or like between them? Like, just get a couple of ideas in your head. And that's all practice games do, is it just gives you a little bit of experience. So when you get to the table, you've got some references to call from. So that'd be my advice, especially for someone who's newer, just to get some experience.
A big part of deployment is counter deployment, knowing what your opponent is doing, knowing their threat ranges. But that's definitely a more advanced thing, right? If you're new at the game and you're trying to figure out how the heck to use your army, just do what you think would make sense for you to do. If you don't know what the opponent's army does, the only way to learn is by doing it, right? So just focus on yourself, focus on doing what you're doing the best you can, and you will learn your mistakes as you go along. You'll understand what your opponent's army is doing. That's one of the reasons why we started the How to Counter Everything channel, or series. How to Counter Everything series is because we want to just explain what other armies are doing, because there's such a well, just an endless well of knowledge that you can go through with Age of Sigmar, understanding how all the different models work, all the allegiance, how they interact with each other. So don't worry about any of that if you're starting out. Just put your Vindictors up front, put your important units behind them, move up the board, fight stuff, learn as you go. So let's have a quick chat about just prepping for tournaments in general, right? Like, we've talked about going to local events, but let's talk about going to GTs, right? I would personally be looking at best coast pairings for these sorts of things. There could also be local sources that you'd be looking at as well, just like Facebook groups, local stores might have community boards, things like that. But there's a lot of questions that people don't think about when they think about going to GTs. Things like, does the event have painting requirements? Well, how much time do I have to paint? When do I have to submit my list? When am I locked into all these things? Like, how far is it? How far am I willing to go? Am I willing to cross a border? Can I cross the border right now? Is it, on the other side of Australia? Like, how far of a drive is that? That's nuts, man. There's a lot of questions that people don't consider. How are you going to transport your models? That's a big one, right? Because if you're driving in a car and you're on a bumpy road, that stuff is going to just shatter if you don't protect it properly, right?
All Elvish armies, really, like anything with elves in it.
Stormcasts are really bad for this. We have all these pointy bits, right? Like I was using a foam case for a little while, and in addition to the paint rubbing off, there's just constantly little broken bits everywhere. Backpacks, helmets, sometimes shoulder pieces are just missing and broken. Like everything just snaps off with foam. I had to eventually move over to a magnetic case, which I really, really enjoy using. So yeah, what do you guys think about GTs? What's been your experience with them? And do you recommend them to players as a form of enjoyment of the hobby? Would you say to a new player like, hey man, you should go check out this 2-day event? Would you recommend them?
Absolutely. Like Coach said, go to a tournament and have fun. Like you said, most people there aren't playing at the top levels. I think you'll just have fun meeting new people, talking to them about Warhammer, seeing these beautifully painted armies, discussing everything from armies to strategy to painting techniques. Most of these events also have some sort of like painting display going on. They have little booths set up to where you can paint new models or try new techniques or try an airbrush. You can watch other professional artists do their thing. I think, yeah, it's like a quintessential sort of Warhammer experience. You don't have to be the most competitive player. Like Coach said, you can do well enough with a thematic army. But yeah, I think it's definitely something every Warhammer player should try and experience at least once.
How about you, Coach? What do you think about GTs? Would you recommend them?
I am like an addict. I have traveled to England to play at a tournament. I have gone to America and played at Adepticon. When borders open up, I'm probably going to I'm looking at something like the Warhammer Open in Austin, potentially 2022. I've got a little travel fund that I've been, because Australia has been, quarantined off the world for a good 18 months. So I've been putting money away every week or every fortnight to build up a hobby fund, so that when borders are open, I can travel to tournaments without impacting my family or any other holidays. I can selfishly say I'm going to Texas, and my wife goes, "Well, no, we want to go to Malta." But to answer your question, tournaments. My very first tournament, I was invited by a bunch of friends. And I had never gone to tournaments. I was always a local guy. I played locally. And my mates wanted there for the camaraderie. So I went to a tournament and I had a really good experience. I didn't know anybody outside my mates. But through 5 games, I got to know people in the community. I made sure to introduce myself and just meet other people. But then the interesting thing that happened was that I went to the next tournament and there were familiar faces. And those relationships built over time to now that I've got people who are friends, people who I can call upon, people I can now stay at their home when I travel internationally and domestically. YouTube channel aside, these people have now become friends. And it will be awkward the first time, but you'll get to, you got to remember, you're at a Warhammer tournament. We all like Warhammer. If nothing more, we all like one thing together, and that's Warhammer. And we can talk about our games. You can talk about your experiences. We can compliment each other on our levels of hobby and ask people, what they're up to or what's their next event. And it really does build like a snowball. So again, they're not like this crazy whack win at all costs. Everyone's going to be mean to you and, just want you to die really quickly. I find a lot of people are actually really forgiving on the table as well. You forget a rule and they go, "Oh, it's okay, you can go back." Again,
yeah,
we're mostly there to roll dice and have fun and have a few beers and just talk Warhammer.
I am going to correct you on one thing. we don't just have one thing in common. We all love Warhammer, and we all hate Lumineth.
Wow.
All right. Well, if it's Settlers Gain, we're not. I don't mind my 1 in 4 Lumineth. I'm thinking Krondus and Teclis for the 5-up bubble, but
Oh yeah, sure.
yeah. I mean,
Oh god. Oh goodness. Yeah.
That looks great. Speaking of net lists.
But can I just ask one
Yeah.
one more quick thing? You mentioned travel, because I don't drive to tournaments. I fly. So I fly, as I mentioned, internationally and domestically. I find the Crusade carry cases, as an example, are really good for carry-on luggage. So I'll put it on. I won't put my models in check-in, because every time I hear about people doing check-in luggage, their models are destroyed. I carry on. I put it up on the shelf. And my armies travel really well. Just got to measure up the size. There's a standard size that those the bays above you are, and as long as it doesn't kind of exceed that bay limit, you'll be right to go.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm assuming that's a magnetized case you're talking about there.
No,
Oh,
just the one that you buy, just the foam case that you buy at Games Workshop. I've traveled with Forge World. I've traveled with big monsters, small troops, stabby units that are easy to break, and in most cases, because I'm holding it and I'm in control, I've almost never had a break.
Okay. Maybe I'm really unlucky. I just assumed it was common.
I mean, some
I'm
things
a
will
fan
break.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the some of the thinner magnetic cases for this reason. I think there's one called A case, and it's thin enough to where I can slide it in under the seat in front of me in
Ooh.
airplanes. So I don't ever check it in. I just slide it in, and it's good to go.
But is it tall enough to hold storm drakes? That's the real question.
Yes, because
How many?
it comes with like these. Well, you can set the shelves are all customizable. So whatever army you're bringing, you can set it according to whatever height you're trying to bring. But yeah, I'm a big fan of that one.
Yeah, I would
Also
never.
a fan of battle. Yeah, but it's tough to check it in, especially with magnets, because I had a battle foam case for a bit, like a Magnarak, and it's like you don't want to check it in, because if it gets moved about, really like jerked about, then they might come off their bases and get destroyed, and you don't want that.
Now, when you guys travel, do you bring super glue along with you? Like, if you're going on a plane, they might not let you, but definitely bring some super glue, because you never know what's going to break. Even if you have the best case in the world, even if you just have like a vacuum container that exists and it hovers in space through magnets, right? Still bring super glue, because even transporting it's one thing, but when you get there, sometimes people will pick up your models and they'll break them. Sometimes you'll flick your wrist and some things will break. So definitely bring super glue with you to events. Little tip.
Yep.
So buying net lists. Would you guys recommend buying a net list? Well, I guess I'll explain what the concept is. A net list is a list you find on the internet. Very self-explanatory. But a lot of people like that because it gives them an idea to shoot for. It's like, oh, I want to play Stormcast. Here's a list that went 5-0 at a GT. Obviously, this is a good list, right? Because theoretically, a bad list shouldn't go 5-0, right? But that's obviously not true. We've seen a lot of armies that are low tier do really well because they get piloted by really good players, and sometimes they get good matchups. But would you consider it like a bad thing to do to get a net list, or would you recommend it? Or what are your thoughts on net lists in general? Start with you, James.
I'd say you have to be careful, quite frankly. Depends on what you're shooting for. So, like, let's say we're talking Hollow Strike right now. It's a pretty good control list, quite frankly, but at the same time, Paul's made it known, and I know from experience at this point that it's not an easy list to execute, quite frankly. You could fall behind really quickly early, and if you're not reacting appropriately. So at the end of the day, it's sure you'll get the models to collect towards it, but if you're not honed enough in knowledge of the game, then you could fall. Might not be the greatest investment.
See, my concern is, like, I would say, no, don't net list if you can. I would say go for some combo that you like in the book and build towards that. The problem with net listing is things could change like that. And I'll admit this: the first list that I ever built, I would say, like after I got that Corn versus Stormcast box, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna build a list for a tournament. I went on the internet, I looked up Dan AOS Shorts' entire like Twitter profile looking for lists. The first competitive list that I built was Gabriel Shoreheart, 2 units of 20 Sequitors, 2 units of 5 Evocators in Cleansing Phalanx. And that list is terrible now. Because you've got new coherency rules, Evocators have lost 2-inch reach, Gabriel Shoreheart no longer does his Deep Strike plus 3 charge. 20 Sequitors I don't even think is possible anymore.
No.
I think only you can take max 15. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Cleansing Phalanx is no longer in play. So if you did that net list and you enjoyed that army for a year, great. You enjoyed painting those models, great. And if you don't regret it, that's fine. But know that it could very well just change, and that net list may not even be like a legal list. Much less competitive is a whole another question. It may not even be legal. So just keep that in mind. So it's better to go for concepts and models you like versus just pure net listing. I think you can take inspiration from a net list. See, oh, okay, this list is running this combo. Maybe that's something I want to implement on a shorter scale in my army, but not something you want to just be like, okay, these are the boxes I'm going to go out and buy. I don't think
I
that's
like
in the long run.
I like what Modnar is saying in the chat right now. Netlist could possibly push you into a playstyle that's not for you. I definitely feel that experience after playing Hollow Strike right now.
Yeah, very powerful list, but it is not the most engaging to play. Well, it can be really fun to play in competitive tournaments against other shooting armies, but if you're playing against another melee army, you're like, well, I've played this match. I know how this goes. You're going to walk up to me, I'm going to screen it, I'm going to shoot you and countercharge you, and okay.
Let's just, if you're playing casually, quite frankly, it's not fun to be the player who's playing against it.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to find an army that fits your play style, and a lot of that usually comes down to picking models you like, right? Because models typically do what they look like they do. So if you like the way a model looks, you'll generally like the way it plays as well. So you might find a list that's some 5-0 Seraphon list that uses a bunch of weird stuff like Gotrek and the Vendanced Witch Hunter lady. And you might think, oh, this is really strong, I want to get all these, and then, like Morgonk was saying, it might get nerfed, or like James is pointing out here, just might not suit your style, right? Like there's just because you see a list and just because the list does really well doesn't mean you're going to like how it does it, and it also doesn't mean you're going to understand how it does it. Like there's a lot of really subtle rule interactions.
That's the key. That's the key. You can pick up an internet list, but you don't know the micro decisions. You don't know which of the units that are being deployed in combination. You don't know which are the ones being set up in reserve. You don't know who's holding the objectives. I like to look at. I'll admit it. I love internet lists. I will look. One of my favorite times is a Monday morning in Australia, where I get to wake up and see the top 10 lists across the world. And what I like to do is I look at the trends. So I don't look at individual lists. I look at the trends to go, right, well, of the Stormcast list right now, Hammers of Sigmar is doing really well. Hallowed Knights is doing really well. And then I ask the question, why? Why is it they're doing well? I notice that Gardas is in those Hallowed Knight lists, so giving a 5-up ward. Okay, cool. I'm seeing Gardas often. I'm seeing a lot of people with, paladins, or I'm seeing some type of build. And I start to see some of those trends, and that might inform my decision. But will I go out and pick, the list that went first at a big event? No. But can you learn things and kind of speed up your thoughts? And could I find these people on Twitter or Facebook or on the Stormcast groups and say, hey, would you tell me more about these lists? That's part of what I do on my channel. My channel is literally finding people who do really well and say, tell me what you're thinking so I can learn from you.
Yeah, I love the interviews you've done for Stormcast. All the guests you've had on talking about it has been, it's things that I wouldn't have thought about. It's a perspective on the game that I wouldn't have necessarily had. There's some things I don't agree with, obviously.
And that's it. There is no silver bullet to Warhammer. I had Joel McGrath from the Measured Gaming crew, and his thoughts and ideas were very different to know. And it was a great discussion to hear both of them. And then you can listen to both and go, right, well, I agree with this, I disagree with this. I still think there's value in this particular model. Just because a talking head on the internet says something's good or bad doesn't make it true. We're all biased, and I play a very counterplay. I hate being aggressive. I hate dropping first. I like to look at how my opponent moves, and then I respond, and I try to outplay them. While some people like to just get the drop on you and kind of crush you as quick as possible. or some people like the monsters, some people love the magic, some people love the shooting. We all have a preference.
My God, you are so good at segues. Because next we're talking about thematic Stormcast armies.
Before we move on there, Paul, we have a question from Ox King. Any recommendations for a good style of Stormcast list for tournaments if you're new?
6 long strike raptors, 4 fulminators, 3 squads of liberators, relictor, and whatever heroes you like. Like, quickest, easiest thing. Like, we're talking about not doing netlist, right? But these units are so easy to use. They're really, really powerful and really easy to use. Probably not good for the game that they are that powerful and that easy to use. But yeah, that's
I would even say like if you're like a newer player, just like take a bunch of Vindictors and take at least one hammer unit. For a newish player, that can be a shooting hammer, it can be a melee hammer.
Yeah,
you'll do well. You'll do fine.
Pick a melee hammer, pick a shooting hammer, pick support heroes. That's it.
Yep, have something that it will defend quite well on an objective, something that can support with some mortal wounds. There is a lot of armor, high armor saves at the moment, and your combat won't be able to cut the mustard. So whether it's judicators, whether it's going to be long strikes, whether it's some type of mortal wounds, and get yourself a nice little hero.
Yeah. One of the cool things about Stormcast is that we have so many units that fill almost the same role that if you don't happen to like one of those units, you have another one like right over there that's willing to do the same thing, right? So if you really want to use some kind of shield wall unit, but you don't like the way, for some reason, Vindictors look, well, you've got Liberators, you've got Vanquishers, you've got Sequitors, you've got so many choices for more or less the same role. And there's different niches and different pros and cons to each one. But yeah, there's so much variety in the Stormcast list. You can really just play what you like. I like the way this model looks. Cool. You can make a list around it. Except for Vanquishers. Don't use Vanquishers. No, I'm kidding. Vanquishers are great. They're really sick models, and I think if you use them, you're not handicapping yourself significantly by using them, right? Like, we rate them poorly, but that's because we're focused on optimizing, right? And they're not optimal. But they're not objectively bad. It's better than not spending points at all, right?
Yes.
Ox King, did you do any sick conversions with your fulminators like you did with your Grand Hammers? I would love to see that, man. Your kit bashes are fantastic. All those sick Night Haunt flames that you put on them are just great. So let's talk about thematic Stormcast armies. So I've written out a bunch of ideas here just as a jumping off point of what you can do as a thematic Stormcast army, because we talk about pitch battles all day, but when you're collecting an army, when you're building an army, really the best way to do it is to pick a theme, to pick some idea behind your whole collection, right? For me, my idea was all of it. Just get every model, right? That was my idea. But obviously that doesn't work for most people because you have a limited time, you have limited hobby budget, and I can definitely say I do this with other armies. Like, I have a small little Caradron force, and my goal there is to have only gunships and only Thunderers, and that's it. That's all I want, right? That's my theme, and I'm going to try to make that work the best I can. But if we're looking at it from Stormcast, there's all kinds of things you can do, right? Like, so some ideas are to build it around a specific chamber, right? Maybe you just want to do the Sacrosanct chamber because you have a bunch of Soul Wars models, and that's a cool list to do, right? They've all got these cool robes. Thematically, it all fits together, and it looks really cool. You can just do all dragons. You can do all Thunderstrike. You don't have to use any of the old Stormcast. And when you start picking these themes, and the more you restrict yourself to these themes, it kind of opens up new possibilities for yourself. You start thinking of, well, I want only Thunderstrike models, but I want to use a Lord Relictor. So how do these goals intersect, right? And that's where kit bashing starts coming into play and things like that. So you can also theme your armies around storm hosts. I know a lot of people, a big draw for them in any army is picking a sub-faction and going with it, right? So I talked about my Caradron, how I just want to use as many gunships as possible. There's a sub-faction for that. So maybe that's going to influence how I paint them. Maybe that influences how I base them. I start looking into their backstory. And yeah. So what kind of themes did you guys pick for your armies? I know, Coach, you've been talking about you're just getting into the gaming side of things with Stormcast now. So
I'm not going to tell my secrets. It's my Armies on Parade build.
Okay.
I would go one step further back than what you've already listed here, and is there a particular story or a character? And something that I've really enjoyed in the last couple of years since Age of Sigmar has been fleshed out is understanding more about the mortal realms, looking at the maps and understanding where exactly my force could come from or is sorting out. So if I'm a Stormcast player, I would start off with is which realm am I from? Where am I based? What is home? Is it Gairan? Is it Akshi? Is it, is it Shaiish? Whatever it might be. And then start thinking about that as a theme and then what my storm host or my chamber might be doing in this particular mission or I've really found enjoyment developing a story over time. And I think picking yourself in a mortal realm really grounded me personally. And I think that's where I've really enjoyed my hobby is grounding myself. And that got me started because then that influences my basing. It influences maybe the storm host and it influences the models that if my army is focused on cleansing death from the realms or some type of uprising, then I can really tie that story. And you mentioned Ox King, for example. He's done a great job to bring that story to life, and it's visually impactful as well as it's competitive. And it also allows you to then look at your army and with blinders pick the models and not just fall into a trap of buying everything. And that's worked for me often. I did a Corrupted Daughters of Cain last year. I've done, a Viking-esque Gargant army the year before. Having a story and having an idea has really kept me focused in my hobby journey.
I actually agree with that. For the way I do armies is I don't just read the rules in the tome. I read like the story, like the whole thing about each unit, about what Stormcast do, what each chamber does, and from there I'll go, okay, I really like this chamber. Like that's how I picked. I'm a big fan of Hammers of Sigmar and Anvils. Those are my two paint schemes. Um, but I'll read the story about them. I'll be like, okay, so will be Anvils of the Heldenhammer. They're fighting dust, and so their bases will have little skulls on them or something. Yeah, but yeah, I'd say the battle tome that you buy for your army, for Stormcast in this case, is really important. Like read through it. It's really good lore. It's really good description of the units and like what they do in the story.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because when I first started collecting my Stormcast, I had a hard time figuring out which basing scheme I wanted to do, and for some reason this was just such a big problem for me. I don't know why, but I ended up going with like plains, kind of like a dusty brown, yellowish kind of plains with like little bits of tufts here and there. And just that simple decision, because I found a paint scheme that I really liked, that led me down thinking, okay, well, my guys are going to be from Ghur. They seem a little more like they're on some kind of savanna or something like that. And that got me thinking, well, why are they in Ghur? What are they doing in Ghur? It's the realm of beasts. This was back in 2016, mind you, when I think the only thing we knew about Ghur was that it was the realm of beasts and there's some orcs there sometimes. So it kind of just got me thinking, got the gears turning, right? Even just the most arbitrary decision of what color I wanted to use on the base started leading me down a theme of what I wanted to do with my guys. It's been rewarding. I definitely enjoy that aspect of collecting my army a lot more when I have a central theme, right? Like with my Seraphon, it was my first army. I just wanted all the dudes. Fine. Stormcast, I started being a little more thematic and I got more enjoyment out of it. But now when I collect a new army, like I said with Caradron, I'm all in on the theme, right? I'm not trying to build the most powerful list I can with them. I'm not even trying to build a list. I'm trying to build like a display almost, right? Like I'm trying to build a little scene and what would make sense in that story that I'm trying to create. And that definitely fits along the lines of rules are temporary, cool models are forever, right? You just get whatever you think looks cool. That I can't hammer that home more.
I think it also ties. I've found that ties you up really nicely. If I'm a new player and I have a story, let's say I am an expansive force and we don't know a lot about the realm of metal, the Shimon. If my warrior chamber or whatever my army is doing is a shock force that Sigmar has sent my peeps to go out and help develop one of the new free cities of the mortal realms, and we're going to reclaim a realm gate of something, right? Every battle that I have can tell a story. It could help me create a hero. It could, if I lose, then how does that loss help me or hinder me from my ultimate goal? And I did this for a tournament a few years ago, our big GT called CanCon, and it was set in the realm of life with my and I was running Cities of Sigmar at the time, and I was running a Hallow Heart, so a very wizardy type army. And I had a bit of fun, and I said to myself, this, win, lose, or draw, what I'm going to do is this is an exploration force that's going out there to find artifacts. And I want to win my games, obviously. I want to claim artifacts. I want to beat my opponents. But also every loss could tell me a little story. And I enjoyed my games far more than just going in with the pure goal of crushing my opponent and winning my games. So it helps you, and it really gets you kind of motivated. And I don't know, there's something about tapping in and having a holistic story rather than just what you see in some communities, which is you buy the strong models. Formulate is a perfect example. Your little Dracoths, if their points get changed, they might sit on the shelf or you sell them. And you obviously want to put time and effort into your models and keep them. So I'm not saying don't be competitive. I'm not saying don't use the rules that are strongest. But what I am saying is try to find stories and ideas that will help you enjoy your games more than just what happens on the tabletop.
Yeah, because what we're talking about here is how to collect an army, right? Not just how to play the army, not just which things to get, but just how to get the most enjoyment out of just owning the models. Like, what's the optimal? I'm not phrasing this very well. I'm just trying to make sure people get the optimal hobby experience.
You're trying to, if you're talking about from a collecting standpoint, yes, do it with that story in mind. Because here's the thing, nobody cares how you paint your models. Like, nobody's gonna come up to you at a tournament and be like, oh, you're playing your optimized tournament Knights Excelsior list, but your models aren't painted like Knights Excelsior. Like, you don't have to do that. And if you don't find joy in painting that paint scheme, then, or having that story in mind, don't do that. Collect your models and paint your models according to that story that you want to tell, I guess.
I can definitely say that the best person, like overall the most enjoyable person to meet at a tournament, is the person who has the best, not necessarily the best painted, but the best thematic army. That person is always my favorite person to go up and talk to at an event, because they are the friendliest person. And if they happen to be a good player, that's even better. But definitely that, if you're that guy, you're awesome. Like, that's just great. That's the best person at the tournament.
One thing I wanted to say is that when you're theming your army, these guys are kind of intense, quite frankly, for me. You can keep it as simple as you want, guys. I went into this, I saw Stormcast as a blank slate. Compared to Chaos, which is one of the armies I wanted to go with, very uniform paint schemes. I just wanted to do something different. So I picked up Stormcast and I just started painting them up in my favorite hockey team's jerseys.
Yep. And what I really like about that idea is that your team has a bunch of different color schemes, right? Like, you're wearing one of the colors now, and that's how you painted your Vanguard. But there's also like a red, black, orange. Yeah, coach. There's like a red, black, orange scheme that you use for your Sacrosanct, and like each chamber kind of has its own theme going on, which is really cool. Like, I've never seen anyone do that kind of thing before with a hockey team. So yeah, whatever reason you think of is valid. It's your hobby. They're your models. And if anybody ever tells you you have to use a certain subfaction rules, how you painted them, you tell that person to screw off. They're not worth your time.
Just walk away from the table at that point.
Yeah.
We're really lucky not to have that tribalism that 40k has, right? That Ultramarines are blue, that Blood Angels are red. If you want to paint, and you can paint your models however you want. And in fact, I would encourage people not just to paint their models in the traditional gold. If you want to paint them in silver and make them feel more like Dungeons and Dragons, Paladin, full plate mail, cool, do it. If you want to do blue or red or orange or multicolors because it's your favorite sports team, do it. You want to put helmets or not helmets, you want to make your Stormcast girls or boys, or you want to make them dogs, whatever.
Lizards.
Who cares? Make them lizards. Like Vince Venturella's got Skaven heads on his with rat cast.
Yeah, rat cast. Yeah.
Whatever. Just enjoy your hobby.
Yeah. That's how to get the most out of this aspect of the hobby, is to make sure you're doing something that you enjoy, that you just want to do. It'll make it a lot easier to spend more money that way.
And if you got a story, it's even cooler. Like, you asked Vince about his Ratcast, he would tell you a great story. If you ask somebody about why they put skeleton heads maybe on their Stormcast instead, there'll be a great story, like the old Death Watch, I think it was, or Death. There was some Company of the Damned. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just it's your hobby, it's your plastic.
Yeah.
So another
But I
common
like
question.
James as well. Like James, I like that you said, don't overcomplicate it. You don't have to listen to every audio book. You don't have to, go crazy on conversions. Like, these are optional things.
Yep.
Totally. Yep. So a common question we get is, what does a competitive list usually look like? I don't know, but I feel like we can have this discussion because we've made a clear delineation between a thematic list and a competitive list. These are units that you want to use when your goal is to win. Your goal is not to make a thematic army with units that you want. They could be units that you want, but when you're trying to 5-0 at a GT, that's what I would consider to be the competitive. That's the goal, right? To win, to be as efficient as possible. So I wanted to have a quick discussion, just mostly as a reference here for a lot of people to go back and be like, oh, hey, I can go back and check that timestamp, and there it is. Just discussing what is in, at least in our opinion, in our experience, a competitive Stormcast army. So usually, and you guys feel free to jump in and correct me on anything, usually it'll have around 2 to 4 hero units, and it'll usually have the minimum amount of battle line possible. And the reasons for that is because our support heroes are very expensive. Our battle line is not very good at doing damage typically, so we want to bring as few of it as possible because we want to have really, really good shooting and really good melee units. Our heroes are not the guys that are doing the damage, and they're not the guys that are taking the damage. They are there to support the other units that are doing that role. So because of that, just as a result, we tend to prefer minimum battle line, like 3, and that's it. You don't want to bring a 4th battle line unit if you can help it, and you don't want to max out on heroes, right? This is very general because I've built lists with 6 heroes and 5 battle line before, so this is very general stuff. You also typically want to use a mix of hammers and anvils. Quick explanation of that is an anvil is a unit that holds something in place, and then an enemy comes to charge it, the anvil holds it there, and then a hammer unit would come in from the side and kill the thing that is holding in place. You can see more about that in our podcast, episode 9. But Stormcast typically are specialized units. We've got these big shields. Obviously, those guys aren't the ones doing damage. They're holding stuff in place. And then we have guys with big hammers, and those are obviously the guys doing the damage, right? So you want to bring a mix of those two. You don't want to go too all-in defensively or offensively. I've seen a lot of people discuss bringing only Dracoth lists, and that seems really good because you get as many Dracoths as possible, which is great. But then you face an army that's way faster than you, and they get to charge you. And if you don't have anything disposable that you can put in their way, they're charging and killing really, really valuable pieces that you can't afford to lose like that. So a mix of hammers and anvils is definitely recommended. And I would also say that usually Stormcast lists have a mix of shooting and melee. It's not just fulminators. I don't think you can reliably win 5-0 if you just have fulminators in your list. I think you need to bring a good mix of shooting and melee. It gives you the most tactical flexibility. And then
it's just better from a collection standpoint. Like, don't just collect one type of unit because you might end up losing out on that in the long run. It's better to just have an all-rounded collection, as far as Stormcast is concerned anyway.
Well, I certainly agree. On the other hand, dragons. You can just have a collection that's just dragons. So there's nothing wrong with that either. And then I just wanted to quickly go over what we consider popular units, like what we find ourselves using a lot, what we see people using a lot. For anvils, as I discussed, they're the units that hold stuff in place. We typically see Vindictors, Liberators, Protectors, and Prosecutors, surprisingly. Prosecutors are disposable. They're just going to die, but they're fast. So they fit that role pretty well. For hammer units, you heard me mention Fulminators and Long Strikes earlier. I would definitely say those are the top 2. Like, if you had to pick 2 Stormcast units that are going to be popular, it's going to be those 2. They do a lot of damage, and that's really what you need right now. Other ones I would say are Annihilators with Grand Hammers are very popular because they're fun. If you like rolling 7s, they're a very, very fun unit to use. And Stormdrake Guard are wicked. They don't do the most damage in the world, but they are really fast and they're dragons, which is all the reason you need. And in terms of shooting, Judicators and Long Strikes are both very good. Both kinds of Judicators. I'm really, really liking Crossbow Judicators right now a lot, and Long Strikes are a staple. They've never been bad. Like, all the way in first edition, they've never been bad. They've always been a phenomenal unit. It's crazy. Yeah. How many boxes do you need to sell, Games Workshop? Just tell us the number so that we can use a different unit. And I would say our most popular heroes in competitive lists are the Relictor. We've talked about him a lot. The Knight-Guestor is very popular. Now, we did mention that he is included, or she, the female sculpt, is included in Soul Wars, but there are multiple Knight-Incantors, so you don't have to get Soul Wars in order to get the Incantor.
It's also a super easy model to proxy, quite frankly, like the Evocator
Mortal
Prime.
Realms, yep. Mortal Realms is probably one of the best sources. There's a free magazine. I want to say there was like a Get Started magazine at every
Yes.
like, at Games Workshop store way back. It has like male Knight Incantor, which is only found in that magazine.
Yeah, I love that
Ask
sculpt.
a
That's
Games Workshop.
great sculpt.
Yeah, if you ask any Games Workshop employee, I'm sure they'll have like one or two, and it's only like $5 or $6.
Yeah.
It's not that much. There's also a ton on the secondary market, and in case you're one of those who bought the Evocator's multi-part kit, you can build the Prime as a Knight Incantor, and then if you don't want to run him as that, run him as an Evocator later. You can totally do that. No
Yep.
Yep, Gardas is super popular. I can give you guys quick explanations of why these units are popular, the heroes in particular. But if you want more information, you're better off looking at our tier list video. We do a very in-depth explanation of every war scroll, what's good about it, what's bad about it, if there is anything bad about it. Gardas is just phenomenal. What makes Gardas really good is everything around him gets a 5+ ward, which is like increasing their health by 50%, which is insane because Stormcast don't have a lot of wounds. So when you increase it by 50%, suddenly you look like a regular army instead of being like this hyper elite army with only like 100 wounds. Lord Castellan is pretty popular. He gives 1 unit +1 to save. It's a very strong effect. Celestant Prime, I would say I would put him on popular. He's actually more popular outside of Stormcast lists, which is weird. A lot of cities armies, Ideneth, I've seen Daughters of Cain using him, Seraphon. He's a very
He's self-sufficient.
Piece. Yeah.
Well, you can't do it in Daughters of Cain anymore.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
After Marathi took over Anvil Guard to turn it Hakuron, that because he's got a 4+ ward save, he comes down from the sky. So there's a lot of armies that don't have the ability to come in from reserves. So the fact that on his war scroll he comes in from reserves, he has a 4+ ward save, can manipulate a dice roll. He's just very good at what he does, and it doesn't rely on your abilities.
Yep.
Stormcast abilities.
For better or for worse. I kind of wish he had a little more synergy with the Stormcast army, but no, he's great.
As a Cities of Sigmar player, I'm very happy that he does what he does.
Yep, I'm sure when I eventually start a Cities army, I will be very happy to have him.
You're like the reverse of me.
Yeah. I mean, I eventually want to use him because I was planning on maybe my next army. I think it might be Adnan Deepkin. And you can take him in Adnan Deepkin. He's good there.
Yeah. Well, if the rumors are true, you can do that soon.
Mm.
Bastion is really good. A lot of people, especially in our Discord, really, really like Bastion. Not just because the model is great, but he's just a fun model to use. He feels a little bit overcosted, right? Like 300 points for his damage and defense it's fine, I guess. But he is pretty popular. I would say he's going to see play. Hammers of Sigmar is a good sub-faction. He's fits really well into Hammers of Sigmar, so he sees play.
Mm-hmm.
I would also put the Lord Celestant on Stardrake on this list as a popular unit, even though it's not the best unit you can use. It's very expensive. It takes up a big chunk of your army, and it's really not the highest damage output, but I think he's still really popular because he's very defensive, right? You can stack a lot of defensive buffs on him and tank things for days with that model. Especially the instant kill jaw ability. As soon as we get out of this Gargant meta, that ability is going to be phenomenal because instant killing things before you attack them, you can pick out unit champions, you can pick out musicians, you can break coherency, you
banners.
Banners, yeah. It's going to be really good. So keep an eye on the Celestant. He's a good pick for competitive games. And then the last two I want to mention are the Knight Judicator and the Lord Arcanum on Toralon, because I can't make a video without talking about the Toralon, apparently. The Knight Judicator is surprised me in how good he is. I really didn't expect it because just looking at the numbers, his damage for his points is not spectacular, especially in an army like Stormcast where we have really, really efficient shooting. But what the Knight Judicator does that nothing else in our army does efficiently is he has Rend 3 shooting. And he's also a hero, which means he can take artifacts. So, for example, you could give him a Mirror Shield to create a Rend 3 shooting battery that can't be shot back. You could put him on the edge of your deployment, and then your opponent deep strikes in some shooting, and they just can't shoot the Knight-Judicator because he has a mirror shield. It's incredible utility. And then you add in the 2 Gryph-hounds that he gives you, which are a cheap screen. You don't care what this unit does most of the time. And if your opponent ever sets up anything in range, you get to shoot at it. So the problem with the Knight-Judicator is that 1 is not enough, right? 1 just does maybe 3 or 6 damage per turn, and that's not going to win you the game. But when you bring 5 of them, it starts to get good. And that is a real list that somebody ran. I think like the first weekend there was an event with the new Stormcast book, and somebody ran a Knight-Judicator spam list.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was refined enough. I think he caught people off guard, and I underrated it. But I'm coming around on it. So keep an eye on the Knight-Judicator. And last up, the Torlon. This podcast favorite model. Objectively, that's not up for discussion. The Torlon's great. He's fast flying wizard, and he has an aura that gives every unit around him +1 to hit. So just really fills out your curve really nicely, makes you very efficient. Just a great model all around. So those are the units I would put as a typical competitive list. Do you guys think I missed anything, or would you contest anything I put on here?
What about the Cult of the Night Relictor?
Nope, not found. Sorry.
That's just a painting contest.
Okay.
I will say that we are on the cusp of the FAQ, so points may get adjusted. So while you might say that this is really good, would you say it if Bastion was 500 points? Now, I'm not saying he's going to be, but contextually. Yes. Things are going to change or could change. And I think, I saw Ox King mention this, and this kind of segues again, but Ox King was talking about the dragons and, is it good? And I think it'd be fair to say right now, people are comparing dragons to the Fulminators, and point for point, people are jumping and going, well, dragons aren't as good now as Fulminators. But what happens if Fulminators go up now? This is kind of why we've said through this discussion, this whole video, that models are forever and things will go up in points, things will go down in points. You've really got to think long term. Otherwise, you'll be chasing the dragon. Like you'll just be constantly chasing your tail.
You are the god of segues, because our next slide is about what units are risky to purchase right now. And one of the reasons is definitely the upcoming FAQ. So let's get through it. So what I mean by risky are units that could get nerfed, right? They could have their points changed or their rules changed, which is more rare, but it can happen. I would also put in units that are getting new battle tomes soon into this category. So if you are, for example, using allied units, or if you're using Cities of Sigmar and Stormkeep, those could totally change, right? Yes, Coach, you have a question?
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
We're currently playing in the realm of Ghur, right? We're playing if you're playing match play, you're playing in the Ghurish Heartlands, which is yes. there are key incentives for monsters and things like that. What happens if tomorrow they release the next battle pack and it's all about wizards?
Oh, then we're screwed.
How does that change? No, but how does that change the game? So again, the value perception and what you add into your list will fundamentally change, and your Torlon might go up even more. And any monster wizard, your evocators and your sequitors might go up in value.
Totally.
While you know what I mean? Like it's just.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to mention. It's like, the monsters are being incentivized, or they could incentivize hordes again. So everyone's running these really low model count armies. Well, what if they start incentivizing things that are like above models of 10? Model count of 10 or more. And yes, that could completely change. And I think we'll probably make videos around. I'm assuming, I don't really know, but I'm assuming they're going to do this around every GHB, so every year. So yeah, I think that's something you do need to take into account.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Suddenly your Vanquishers are looking good at that point, and suddenly you want more Battle Mages as the allied units.
I want to live in the Vanquisher meta. That's where I want to be.
Yeah.
I want to live in the Gryph-hound meta. That's where I want to live.
Yeah. Where summoning armies are so rampant that you're just firing off wave after wave of Gryph-hound barks. So some units definitely stand out. in my eyes as risky. They're popular units, definitely. But like taking a look at Cities of Sigmar, for example, battle mages could totally change, right? Like we really like battle
I
mages.
feel attacked, Paul.
I just got some.
I just
Battle mages are risky right now. They're good. I like using them, but the thing is, the way the realm rules work right now, and the way battle mages work, they were designed with second edition in mind, where you didn't know what realm you were playing in. But now, if you know every single game is going to be in Ghur, the Ghur battle mage is like way better than his points suggest, right? And his spell is really good too. I don't know if they, when they designed it, they did it purposefully that you could use it on Stormcast as an ally, or any order unit, really, as an ally. +2 run and charge is insane in a game with very few bonuses to run and charge anymore. So I would consider him risky. The Frostheart Phoenix is another one. Maybe not as risky just because it's always had the same ability throughout all of Age of Sigmar, the -1 wound aura. Very, very strong effect. Incredibly strong, always been strong. The only reason I would suggest that they might change it is just because it is that strong, and they don't make abilities that strong in 3rd edition based on the battle tomes. So there's a bit of risk there, right? It's a cool model. I'm so close to getting one. I'm so close because I really want to run one, but I'm worried that the new Cities of Sigmar battle tome will come out and they will update its rules, and I just suddenly all I have is a cool model, which it's not the worst thing in the world, but I want to use it in games, right? That's the reason I want to get it, not just for the looks. And Gotrek, I would definitely put Gotrek on this list. Could be a points thing, could be a rules change, but that guy is seeing play in a lot of armies right now, and he is due for some changes for sure. And then looking at Stormcast, Stormdrake Guard were nerfed already twice. They could get nerfed a 3rd time or a 4th time. There's no limit to how many times they can nerf these things. So I would consider them a little bit risky.
I think Krondus and Karazai, specifically Krondus, is more of a risk than Stormdrake Guard.
You think so?
Really? I think Krondus is underpointed. I think Krondus could go up 50 and Karazai goes down 50. But I think Stormdrake Guard are probably over. I think Krondus's utility value is just extraordinary. When I go pound for pound, Karazai versus Krondus, I don't think there's much of a difference in the combat profile between the two. The fact that Krondus brings in so much wizardry power and the debuff shenanigans, I think he's probably... To me, I think that's the risk. I think the Stormdrake Guard are fairly costed. I think they're okay. If any of these rumors are true and there's a wizard dragon coming in the future on, a Stormdrake, Stormguard, maybe a different story, but I think Krondus is a little bit undercosted.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, especially if we shift out of Ghur and the game changes from a heavy monster meta, Krondus is definitely going to get a lot better. Because right now the only thing holding Krondus back, I think, is the fact that when you face 4 Gargants, he's really not that effective for his points. Whereas if you face 30 skeletons, you're going to have the best day of your life because that Calamitous Tail is going to destroy those skeletons easily. So,
well, you'll debuff their save to where they get no save, and then you'll chew through anyone.
And that's the debuff stuff that you can do in the superpower wizard that Krondus is. Anyway, I think that's more of a risk, folks, than the Stormdrake Guard. I think they're fairly costed.
I think the Lord Relictor is a risky unit right now, partly because of how difficult he is to get. Like, you don't want to go spending $100 on a start collecting and then find out that the Lord Relictor is going up in points. I don't think the Lord Relictor should be nerfed. I think for 145 points, that's a very fair price for this model. Not too much and not too little, because it is just a 6-wound hero with a mediocre combat profile. And the only reason people use him is because he has +1 to prayers, right? So I don't think the Lord Relictor will get nerfed, but Games Workshop tends to do things based off popularity. If a model is so popular that it's in every single Stormcast list, they'll nerf it just to shake things up. Like, it doesn't even have to be overpowered, but that is a thing that they've done in the past. Similarly, Vanguard Raptors, I'm not of the opinion that they are too strong right now, but they still could see a point increase just because they are very popular and, frankly, not that fun to play against. So I think they will do something to discourage their use. I think Judicators are less risky. I don't think people have... most people are using Raptors, right? They're going to take all the heat. Judicators do more damage and have way more wounds. So it seems like they should get nerfed.
I played a list of, I think it was like 10 or 15 Judicators with Indrasa bringing models back and Rally bringing models back. It was a tough. I think it took me a good 3 turns with trying to take them down.
Mm-hmm. Even with a 4-up save, the way Stormcast stack saves, it makes them very, very efficient at taking trades. And then you start rallying back. Like, nobody appreciates how good Stormcast are at rallying right now. Because when you rally back 80 points, that's really good.
I played an opponent who had 4 Fulminators and rallied 2 out of 3. I'd killed Marathi had killed 3 of his 4, and he rolled his rally and he brought back 2 out of the 3. And I just looked at him, and then Indrasa's running around bringing back other parts of his army. So you do get good value from that CP.
Yeah. Fulminators are definitely on the risky unit list, I would say, more so than Raptors. The damage Fulminators can do is absurd. Everybody is talking about it, that they are, from an internal standpoint too, it's not good for Fulminators to be so cheap, because every other option is just pales in comparison.
Overshadowed.
Right? Yeah. Why use Concussors? Ever. Why use Desolators? Ever. Right? There has to be a significant point increase to differentiate these 2 units. That said, I don't mind so much if Fulminators go up if they brought other things down, right? Because I don't think a unit of 4 Fulminators in a vacuum is overpowered, right? It does a lot of damage, but you can kill it. What I'm worried about with Fulminators is that people are going to start spamming them because their damage is so good. Even in a squad of 2, people are going to bring 4, 6, 8, maybe 10 to a list, and that's what I'm concerned about.
They're also an auto, including Living City too. So Cities of Sigmar folks love them as well. So they're not just standout units in Stormcast; they're standout ally choices as well. So I think they're a risky business.
Yep. I have a feeling they're going to errata that Living City interaction to make it not work on Stormcast units, because it's really, really strong with Stormcast and not nearly as strong for Cities units. I don't think they.
Well, they're coalition, so you could even do that with Stormdrake Guard. It's kind of insane actually how good that is.
Even the Stardrake can do it. The Stardrake can outflank.
The Stardrake now is a shooting attack. Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty nuts. So another thing I wanted to have a little discussion about here is the prospect of them eventually cutting out the old Stormcast models, because what we're seeing here seems to be a Primaris style update to Stormcast, and a lot of people suspect that what's going to happen with the Space Marines is that the Primaris are slowly, release by release, replacing the old models. Because if you look at what they've released, it does seem to be the case that they are going through, and it's like a true scale update that they're doing over a period of 10 years. So could the same thing be happening to Stormcast? Do you guys get that feeling?
Yes, I do. I just don't. The thing is, we don't know how fast it'll be. Like for Space Marine players, when I talk to them, because there's quite a few 40k players around here, it doesn't make sense for them to not buy they call them Firstborn and Primaris. It doesn't make sense for them to not buy Firstborn and not enjoy the game while they're still around. At the same time, yes, the consensus is within the next 3, 4, 5 years, we are going to see a phasing out of the Firstborn, and when all the Primaris replacements come into play. And I think, like, if the plan really is to replace old cast in the next 5, 6 years, 5 years is a long time to own models. I don't think that's something like you should be fine buying. Like, it doesn't feel like it's something that's going to happen immediately. So if you want to buy them, paint some Raptors now, thinking, they'll come up with Thunderstrike Raptors sometime in the future, I don't think you should be pining on that wait. Like, you should just go buy yourself some Retributors Raptors, have fun,
It definitely feels
I think the cost of admission is low enough to where you can justify buying them and not having to worry about them being phased out in 5 years.
Mm-hmm. It definitely feels different than the Primaris. Like what Chase is saying in the chat, that the Primaris Marines are straight up bigger than normal Marines, right? They're not a redesign. They're a refresh is a better way to put it. This is the size that we always wanted Marines to be. Our technology just didn't catch up with our scale, right? And now it can. Whereas Thunderstrike are actually the same scale as regular Stormcast, and for all we know, Thunderstrike is just one of many new armor types. Maybe the next time they do a Stormcast release, there's going to be an entirely new armor type, right? Maybe that's the way forward. Instead of doing chambers, we're going to be doing just new armor types going forward. So I don't think there's first of all, there's nothing obviously credible to this idea. It's just an idea of people, connecting dots that might not necessarily need to be connected. So it doesn't feel, it just feels different with Stormcast than it does Primaris. So I'm not worried about this personally.
When we eventually get a Thunderstrike Wave 2, which I think will happen sometime in the next 3 years, I want to say, we'll know more. This is just all we can do is guess, right? At this point,
if they come out with if they come out with Vanguard Thunderstrike and Sacrosanct Thunderstrike, I think at that point the writing would be on the wall. But I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah,
I think the reality that I think about is that you now have about 80 models. I think give or take somewhere between 80 to 100.
Yeah, 76 to 80 war scrolls. Yep.
You've got, let's call it 80 for cleans, right? You've got expansions through Underworlds. You're getting new hero options and things being unlocked constantly. At what point does the book become too big? And I would say, arguably, it already is too big. You've got too many options to choose from, and a lot of roles that are being duplicated. You've got minor changes. So how do you keep releasing models for this army, but keep it in rein? How do you rein it in? So do you retire Generation 1? Do you split the book off like Space Marine have done, and then you have the Sacrosanct Chamber has a pure book, other different types of builds? Or do you stop releasing models for Stormcast? Or do you just have like 150 units by the year 2025? Now, I don't know. But I think at some point in time, something has to happen, because when you compare your book to every other book, most other armies have like 20 unit choices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, we are very
I've
spoiled.
actually thought about this. Yeah, I have thought about this, and I think the cleanest way for them, and the way I can see it, the biggest problem in the Stormcast War Scroll bloat comes from heroes. We have a lot of obsolete foot heroes that were very much designed for Age of Sigmar 1.0, and they are not. That is not how the game is played anymore in 3.0. I think the way to start would be to start moving them to Legends. Like, I think the Quester should not even be in the book, the Knight-Guestor. I don't think the Heralder should be in the book. I think the Heralder can just move to Legends, or you can just run it as a replacement Liberator or something. Do that. Sorry, I know Paul loves the Heralder, but this is just an idea. You could do that. The second thing you could do is you could start combining units. Like, let's say we're 3 years in the future, we get a Thunderstrike on Dracoth. We get a new Cav unit entirely. You could merge the 3 Dracothian Guard profiles into the same profile and have it just be a weapon choice. So that way you've sort of moved it into Legends, but you've not invalidated someone's collection. They can still run it. It's just not as a specialized, like a Fulminator, Concussor, Desolator like it used to be. It's just a Dracothian Guard unit with whatever weapon it has. So they could do those things to where it cuts down the War Scroll bloat. You go from 2 pages to 1.
See, I'm also thinking collections. I'm thinking inventory. I'm thinking about if I am a warehouse stocking Stormcast product, at what point is there too many models sitting on my shelves? I don't know. I think I think there's a risk. Certainly, old cast gets retired. Is Vindictors a replacement for Liberators? Question mark. Is there a time that the book has to be split or retired or something? Yes. Does the old models have a higher risk than the newer models? Yes.
It seems like what they're doing with a lot of other factions that have been around since Warhammer Fantasy is updating the older skulls, right? That's definitely been a common theme. We started seeing that. I think Gits were the first one where they redid they did a bunch of squigs and they did trogs and things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it feels like this is what's happening with Stormcast too, right? It would not be out of line, but now if they came out and said these are straight up replacements, they'd burn a lot of bridges, right? People don't want that. So they would, if they were doing this, they would roll it out over a period of 10 years, a decade, right? A lot of small releases here and there, slowly over time replacing the models. So even if that is what's happening, we have so much time to enjoy these models, and they'll still be there on the shelf long after we're done playing with them. So I don't think it's a big deal. Like, if you like the old cast, then go for it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that right now. It's all conspiracy theories. Not even like it's less credible than a conspiracy theory. It's an idea that's floating around.
I will also say that what you are sharing here are similar conversations that are happening across other factions. At what point do the Cities of Sigmar range get kind of squatted or reduced and revisited? We saw that with skeletons and the changing of skeletons in Soul Black Gravelords. Will Durthu get replaced with a new Kernothi type model? This is not unique to Stormcast, folks. So don't think that you're being bullied or punished. It's just unlike Magic the Gathering, where you don't paint the card and you can just retire cards and put them on the shelf. There's obviously a lot of money and emotion that goes into our hobby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will also say, unlike Space Marines, 80 Stormcast feels about our limit, whereas Space Marines are up to like 100 something, 130 maybe. They have an absurd
like
amount.
150 absurd amount, yeah.
But the difference is they sell. So as long as Stormcast are selling, they will never retire models, right? It has to get really, really bad in terms of sales, and I think Space Marines are the proof of that, because people still buy Tactical Marines, people still buy the old Scouts, they still buy old Bikers, and as long as people are buying them, they're going to keep making them. So, yeah. Another thing on the same vein is, what do you guys think is the future of endless spells? Would you recommend somebody go out and buy Malign Sorcery if they're a new player?
That's a good question. I didn't think about that. I didn't bother with it. I just borrowed spells off of my friends, so I can't really answer that one. In my opinion, they should be moved to enhancements. They shouldn't cost points.
Yeah, I would actually love that, especially the faction-specific ones. If you could bring them without points, but by spending an enhancement from a Warlord battalion, for example, I would think that would be a lot better.
Like, don't make it like every army can take one, because I think some are too strong. Like Umbral Spell Portal, for instance, is like pretty much an auto take whenever someone takes Nagash or Kairos. Make them have to like spend an enhancement slot, and this will go ways into cutting people biting into Battle Regiment all the time.
Yeah. Now the reason I bring up endless spells, there's two main reasons. One, from a narrative perspective, that doesn't make sense for them to be around anymore. Right, the Necroquake that created them is gone. The Life Quake that Alariel created is passed by. So there could be still some spells running around, but it's not like there's so much magic. I could be totally wrong about this. I'm not a lore guy, but it seems like there's no lore reason for them to be around anymore. But also from a manufacturing side of things, it's commonly known that these were made in factories in China, and the relationship with the UK and China has been very different than it was 3 years ago when they first released these things. I think they've moved some of their manufacturing back to the UK, and if you're manufacturing stuff in the UK, it's going to be Space Marines. It's going to be the stuff people are going to spend a lot of money on, higher quality molds. The endless spells were lower texture, I guess. Is that the right way to put it? Lower detail, lower fidelity, right? So I have just this nagging feeling that next edition, endless spells just aren't going to be allowed in any game mode anymore. I just get that feeling. Do you guys feel that?
I have a feeling we're not going to see endless spells for any new armies. I think that was very much a 2.0 thing. I think people don't take them as much. People just use, the most I've seen are like Burning Head and Umbral Spell Portal. And I don't like them. Like, if they make them purposefully not good, or like the older ones, like we've seen, like they've made some of them purposefully not good. I don't want it to be this thing that, I have to buy this to complete my collection. I don't want it to become another, like, I don't know how to say it, like the terrain piece. Like, I don't know how I feel about that, because like for most armies, it's a free benefit. Like if I'm OBR, I have to take the Bowtide Nexus, and I have to like buy that model. Like I don't know how I feel about that.
How long do they want to manufacture that stuff, right? Yeah. Especially for low play armies like Fire Slayers. How long do they want to hold on to the terrain piece for Fire Slayers? Because all the Fire Slayer players pretty much have one. How many people are getting into it? What's the cost benefit analysis? I just get the feeling that stuff like terrain and endless spells it won't stick around forever.
Mm-hmm. Terrain, I think will stick around. I think endless spells. If I'm new to collecting Stormcast, no, I wouldn't rush out and right this minute buy Malign Sorcery. If I really want one particular endless spell, I would probably go onto eBay and just buy it as a singular.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't like I've got all of the endless spells, both Malign Sorcery and Forbidden Power, and there's probably 5 that I rotated through my armies like this I don't think I've ever run half of them. So, and now that the points have gone up in Age of Sigmar 3 and they're a lot easier to unbind, they're just not on a lot of incentives right now. I would wait until there's a more incentive to go out and, that could be something else in your collection that you'll get far greater value from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely don't recommend the endless spells, especially not the Stormcast ones. They are not worth your money right now.
Comet's all right.
Yeah, if it didn't cost points, I would definitely use it if it didn't cost points. So another one of these like quick list things, just for reference for later. Our opinion, right? Standard caveat. If you disagree, cool. Let's have a discussion about it. But a lot of people don't want to spend money on units that are not doing well in pitch battles right now. Units that aren't efficient. They feel like they feel like tricked almost, right? Like, oh, I spent all this money and this model is cool, and then I find out that it's not good. And I hate that Games Workshop does this, that they make models that people don't get excited about. I don't want to say any of these are objectively bad, but if you are interested in competitive play and you want to get the most bang for your buck, I would say, and you guys can feel free to disagree with this, but I would say to avoid the units on this list, right? Sequitors and Vanquishers are just inefficient for what they do. Annihilators with shields don't seem to do anything compared to Grand Hammers. Same deal with Retributors and Decimators. Compared to Grand Hammers, it seems like it's hard to make a case for them. I'm not going to go through every single unit on this list, but for quick reference, there you go. If you guys are looking for our opinion, maybe not the coach's opinion, but let's say the Stormkeep's opinion on which units to avoid for competitive play, it would be this list here. Is there anything on here you guys would disagree with in particular that would merit a discussion?
Probably evocators. I mean, that's a very but no, I get the gist of it. My thing is, you can. I view competitive play as like many like tiers of play.
Let me clarify then. I'm thinking like top tier. Like you want to be one of those 10% of players at the GT going 5-0. You want the most efficient list possible. You don't want to waste any money on anything that's not going to get you there. This is who this list is meant for.
If that's the mindset, sure. But like you could, like for instance, like for me, like I'm a little, I can see evocators and annihilators with shields making their way into some just competitive, not we're not talking about like the unicorns or whatever.
Yeah, I love all these models. I have all these models. I like using them. I don't want anybody to get the idea that you should just never get these. But it is a common question we've received: is short list of things that aren't that great.
I'm reluctant to agree with you, given that we're on the cusp of the FAQ.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like if Dracolines go down 100 points, and you're watching this video in February 2022, then we look crazy. So I think contextually, it's just hard, right? Like,
just like we can't, just like they're risky units. This is also a risky list because if evocators on Dracolines suddenly become 220, wow, that opens up a lot of options, right?
What I will say though is the Underworld Warbands are great alternative sculpts. So, we were talking about Lord Relictors and things like that, and even Knight Incantors. These are great alternative sculpts in your army. So maybe wouldn't run the Warband. But I have actually found a lot of passion in, passion's probably not the right word, but Underworld's Warbands are great as well because you don't give away broken ranks because they're a cheap screen and you don't give away a lot. So I wouldn't write things off completely.
Oh yeah. This is again to optimize people who just don't want to spend a single dollar that won't get them to a 5-0 to GT. Right, that's the mindset going into this list. But like Ox King is asking in the chat, would point reductions change my mind on some of these, or are they War Scrolls just busted? There's very few models in Stormcast where the War Scroll is just so bad that no amount of points would make them viable. A lot of our units are just, I would consider not viable just because of their points, right? Like if, like what Coach was saying, if Dracolines went down 100 points, oh yeah, that's a game changer, right? A lot of this is based on the points, and points can change like that. One day you wake up and everything's totally different, which is why we have been spending the last 2 hours talking about you should collect the models you like, and points come and go. This was just to answer a common question in our Discord. And similarly, another one we get all the time is how you should equip your units, right? I'm not going to read off through the whole list. I'm just going to timestamp this. We're going to leave it here. But the one I am going to focus on is at the bottom there. I'm talking about Dracoths, Drakesworn, and Star Drakes. And I mentioned to magnetize these models. So this is an aspect of the hobby that a lot of players find very, very intimidating. And what this typically refers to is drilling a hole on two different sides of a model, inserting magnets, and then having it magnetize. So James, you recently got into this. Tell me about your experience with magnetizing as somebody who has never done it before.
So started off with the Dracothian Guard. Quite frankly, those are probably the best kit to start magnetizing with, I'd have to say. I just carried that same sort of toolbox that I learned from that into doing it with my Annihilators now, so I don't have to spend additional money on shield Annihilators. I can just swap between Grand Hammers and shields now.
Nice. Yeah, so here on this slide, this is a photo I share in our Discord, and it's a quick guide to magnetizing the Dracothian Guard. I use them as an example because they are by far the easiest kit I've ever seen to magnetize. Exactly where you put the magnets are, it's on the elbow bit on their arms, and that happens to also be most of the arm connection, right? So you can see in the picture here, there's a hand crossbow, there's a glaive, and there's an axe. All of them have a little magnet just in the right spot. I drilled a little hole in the other side of the arm, and I can just snap those on anytime I want. This is a phenomenal kit to learn how to magnetize. If you haven't tried it because you're intimidated or it seems too complicated, trust me, it's not. It's really, really easy to magnetize these models. And when they cost like $60 a kit, and you get 2 models out of that, and instead you could be getting potentially 6 different models out of that, you'll find it really worth your time to learn how to do this. It's a great skill. You should definitely learn how to do this.
One note there that's super important is that last dot. Check the polarity on the magnets.
Yeah.
I didn't run into it, but it is a trap if there ever was one.
Yep, make sure that it's actually gonna work. And definitely use super glue. I've made the mistake of putting a bunch of plastic glue in and it melts all around, and then you have to clean out the hole even further. It's just don't use plastic glue. Use super glue or crazy glue when you're doing this. So, all right, and that brings us to the last part here, kind of just like a little freeform discussion on just building and painting and collecting Stormcast in general, right? So how do you guys prefer doing it? Do you like doing helmets all over the place, or do you guys like doing the faces? Because I've seen some people swear by one and not the other.
Mixed.
Mix? Okay.
Yeah.
Coach, how about you?
Well, I think we've got to remember the context of this show. And if I'm starting to play Stormcast and I'm new to the hobby, an easy way would be to go helmets, because faces are intimidating. They can be quite difficult, a lot harder than what you're currently doing. So helmets are definitely an easier way to get into it. If you're more experienced, faces are great. And I would just do my faces separately. So I would build my kits without the face attached to the model, and I'd paint them separately and then attach them at the end. You'll get much better quality painting, and you'll be able to get to a lot more of the model by doing it that way. Personally, I have built with faces. I'm not a fan of the helmeted Stormcast. I don't like the faceless souls. You know, the lore tells me that these are the champions of Sigmar who have been reforged. I want to know who they are. So for me, I want the faces. I've gone out to Forge World and purchased the male and female bonus sprues. They give you like 10 different heads for male and female. I prefer that over the heads, but I've seen some great head swaps from many kits.
Yeah.
Too.
One that comes to mind is the Freegill Greatsword heads, the medieval plate heads over Vindictors. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, like I've seen some what's it called? The 30k Horus Heresy. I think it's like MK1s. It's more knightly.
Yeah.
You know, having more knightly's type of heads, or you can get literally Vince Ventrella's done his Skaven rats. Like
there's a lot of great third-party bits that you can get for this sort of thing. Definitely
Yeah.
going to shout out Puppets War. They make phenomenal heads that fit just right on Stormcast heads. There's a lot of other places too. I want to say, Coach,
Put a caveat though,
Yeah.
that if you attend a Warhammer store,
Mm.
or if you're planning on going to like a Warhammer event, whether it's Warhammer World or one of the Warhammer Opens, Games Workshop may tell you that you're not allowed to use your models because they are requiring full Games Workshop kit. So if you are going to use a third party or 3D print them yourself, just be aware that you may not be welcome to play with your Stormcast. So just keep that in mind.
That does also extend to resin bases. They have a thing about people using third-party resin bases. I use a lot of resin bases. I use a lot of different companies. I really like the way they look. They add like that extra little bit of flair to the model. And I have been told that it would not be acceptable at Warhammer World in the UK.
If you're just playing at your local game store, who cares? Do it. Doesn't matter. But if you Games Workshop in the terms and conditions do say that your model, and even in the Warhammer stores, they have the right, if your models aren't 100% Games Workshop or Forge World, can turn you away.
Yep. And that also does extend. I know people who have been turned away from Warhammer World for using tufts that were not made by Games Workshop. They can be quite strict sometimes. It's
we're getting into a weird like how are you going to tell me that this is Games Workshop sand on my base? Are you going to test the black and not see that it's Vallejo? I think,
right?
Yeah, like how are they going to tell that's not sterling mud?
I just know one person's told me I should probably have verified it before talking about it.
I wouldn't want to scare the audience, and I'm not trying to defend Games Workshop. I just think there is things like heads and helmets and weapons, things that are obvious basing. Games Workshop will keep an eye out for things like paint, things like tufts.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna matter.
I'll have the boys down in the lab run this paint color real quick before your game and make sure.
Well, I know that for a fact because I went to the GW Open recently and I use Army Painter tufts and I use Army Painter basing.
Okay, that's good.
No one cares. Yeah.
On the topic of helmets, I actually got it. One of the reasons I liked Stormcast was because they had the uniform faces all across, and there was actually a lore explanation for this. Because chaos thrives on mortal emotion, and because the raging chaos at the time was Khorne, which is all about anger, rage, honorable combat, but like taken to an extreme, right? They wanted to see the fear or defiance in the eyes of their opponents because that's what gave them strength, because it was all fueled by emotion. So Sigmar specifically went out of his way to make a bunch of golden godmen who did not show emotion because it was more unnerving to Khorne, who thrives on emotion, because Sigmar's whole deal is kind of like a low-key emperor from 40k, where he does want to defeat chaos forever, ideally, and one of the ways to do that is to stamp out emotion. And there's been this like long-running thread in the Stormcast lore of is Sigmar purposefully taking away the emotions of the Stormcast over time in order to help combat the chaos threat. So I've always liked that little detail, that they didn't have to flesh that out, right? Because it's totally just an artistic choice. But the fact that they actually turned that into a little narrative thing was really cool to me, and I like that. I like the idea of like this Khorne berserker who's been just eating the bodies of his victims as they're like looking at him in terror, right? They're straight up cannibals, and then he faces off against this like towering, golden armored, just no expression, doesn't even care that he's fighting you. Like I thought that was really cool. But I do like painting faces on my dudes as well. I'm not good at it, but
you do you. If you like faces, do faces. You don't like you want helmets, do helmets.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong.
Exactly. Yep. So let's talk about picking a paint scheme and how you went about picking the colors that you did. Now we know, James, you picked because you liked the hockey team colors, and it's a sweet concept. But how about you guys? We'll start with Mergonk. How did you pick your army scheme?
I read the Battle Tome, loved Hammers Sigmar, love anvils, looked up how to paint anvils, how to paint hammers, went with that.
Nice and simple. How about you, Coach? Do you have any painted Stormcast you want to show off?
Not to show off, but I made my own color scheme. I looked at the books. I've looked at a lot of cool tutorials, and me being a special snowflake, I wanted something a bit more unique to me. So I've mocked up. I think there's a really cool template if you Google search it, like a little paint. You can just throw some colors down and make up your own scheme. So it's almost like I've kind of tapped into a little bit of the 40K with the sister chapters, and you have alternative color schemes. So I've also looked at a lot of 40K, given that they've got so many different color combinations. There's some things you can borrow from, and there's also a lot of great tutorials as well that can show you how to paint base wolves, paint iron hands, iron fists, or whatever it is, and borrow from those concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, I went with black armor because I saw one magazine in first edition that had like a black armor Stormcast, and I thought, yeah, that looks great. You can actually see the gold trim on them. It's not just gold on gold on gold. You can actually make out details, and that's what I went with. And then that turned out to be the Anvils of Heldenhammer, which have a long and storied history of being really, really good and now really, really bad. So
for me, it was simplicity too, because when I was starting out, I didn't want something that was too complicated. Edge highlighting scared the crap out of me. And I saw the gold armor, which was, hey, sprayed black, sprayed gold. No edge highlighting really needed. Just put a shade on it and you're really good to go. And so that was a factor when I was starting the hobby.
Yeah, I have a note here talking about speed versus quality, but also there's an element of it that is how intimidating it is for new players to actually get through and paint something, right? And how much does that anxiety that you feel over your perceived lack of skill affect the color palette that and techniques that you want to use? There's definitely an element of that.
I mean, that's actually so the way it was for me was I went for the simple one because I knew I could do that, and I could do that fairly well enough just by watching a YouTube tutorial. And as I felt my skills increase, I started branching out, and that's when I was like, okay, I'll try anvils now because I feel like I'm confident enough to where I can edge highlight that black and have it pop out and look good. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with switching schemes, halfway through painting your army, or like I said, it's your models, you do you. So if you want to pick something easy to start with that gives you more confidence, and then move on to something that's slightly more complicated and maybe richer in contrast and different, uses all kinds of different colors, yeah, totally, that's on you.
Well, that might be a reason to go just to buy a box of Liberators, or if you got the Mortal Realms magazine, just buy 5 or 10 models and use them as a test scheme. Try out some concepts and then see what they like, and then you might jump into your real models.
The Underworld warbands are really good for this sort of thing. You can test out other schemes, and then like I have thousands and thousands of points of black armored Stormcast, but I really like doing the Knights Excelsior scheme on little warbands here and there, or Celestial Vindicators or something, just to break up the monotony of painting thousands of points of black armored dudes. I didn't know you actually switched your color scheme. How exactly did you break it up? Was it like a new chamber came out and you did it that way, or was it?
Yeah, so the way I do it is, for me it was chamber. So I had so all my warrior chamber stuff is in, and even Vanguard is in, I think hammers for now. All my sacrosanct stuff is in Anvils of the Heldenhammer.
Cool. What color scheme did you do on the Thunderstrike?
So I don't know if you saw my Annihilators that I took to the open. They're hammers of Sigmar.
Oh, so you went back. Okay.
Yeah. So because I really like the story of the Eternals inside when Soul Wars was going on, so that's what I went with for my Sacrosanct Chamber.
Cool.
It was a story that got me into it. Plus, I was confident that I could highlight black now.
They made them look really good too. The anvils with the cloaks and everything that they had in second edition.
Yeah, I really like the Death Mask. Like they paint the bone colors over the black mask, and it's really good.
Yeah.
I'm going to probably butcher this. I'm pretty sure Jack from Rerolling Ones was in the chat earlier, and I remember his Stormcast, and I hope I don't get this wrong. I think they were painted like the Seahawks, which is an American
his green
sports
and black
team.
color.
Yeah, it's like green and blue or green and black. Again, I think I really like James. James, I love your concept. As a proud Bulldogs man, blue and white would look great. And they're tried and tested colors as well. So
yeah, well, it's funny because the Seattle Seahawks and the Vancouver Canucks are basically the same color scheme, quite frankly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I love it as an alternative concept. Like, you don't have to do the 6 that's in the book, or however many there's in the book.
Yeah.
Feel liberated to do your own scheme and make it your own.
Yeah, and there's always the side benefit that you can just use whatever Stormhost rules you want if you make up your own color scheme. So if there's ever a discussion about it, you can just avoid it completely by making up your own scheme. So there's that.
Yeah. No tournament organizer is going to see your army painted in one color scheme and try to actually you and say, well, why is your list submitted as this list and not this list? It's not 40k. Like, you can't push a Blood Angel over as an Ultramarine. We don't have that problem.
Yeah. Well, that rule definitely makes a lot more sense in 40k, because if I'm across the table and the guy's got Space Marines and he's using Blood Angel rules with a bunch of blue guys, I'm going to be like, oh, okay, all right. There's so many different kinds of Space Marines. It just makes it easier to identify it right away.
Actually, I wouldn't even mind that. The problem is 40k allows the detachment mixing. You could have a detachment of Ultramarines with a detachment of Blood Angels, and then it becomes really important for them to be differentiated.
Totally.
Because you have 2 detachments with separate rules, but yeah, like Coach said, we don't have that problem. So
if you're coming in from 40k and Stormcast is your jam, know that the rules aren't as strict as 40k.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing Stormcast are really good at, and something that I think goes underappreciated, is how well they kit bash. I think they kit bash exceedingly well. I think one of the best things about Stormcast is that all the bits just kind of fit together nicely on all the different models, and I really appreciate that about them. And like, I've taken spears from prosecutors and put them on liberators, and that looks great. Ox King in the chat has done phenomenal work using Retributor arms to turn regular annihilators into Grandhammer annihilators. It's such a satisfying thing, because my favorite part of the hobby is building. I love building and collecting and having all this stuff. Painting and gaming, those are secondary for me. I really just like building stuff. And just having all these different bits. One problem I'm running into right now is that the Knight Arcanum, I accidentally clipped off her hand, and I'm trying to find a replacement. You know, she's got like her fingers up like that or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a replacement, and I just can't figure it out.
You're about to become a master of green stuff.
I guess that's the next step. I got to learn how to do that. I was hoping to start with like some hair or cloaks or something, and not something as detailed as a hand.
Well, you've seen some of my models. I've one of the things that I'm doing in my army is I'm kit bashing the hell out of it, and I put a photo on Twitter recently of my Gardas, and I have swapped Gardas's sword. So Gardas now has, I think it's the Emperor's Champion. So I've tapped a lot of the Black Templar models. So I've got their captain leader, the High Marshal Brecht, or whatever his name is.
Helbrecht.
He's got I've got Helbrecht's helmet. He's got a helmet version, much like Gardas. So I've got like this very 40k, but it's also very knightly head for Gardas, and he's got an alternative sword. And I may actually even swap out his weapon. I'm doing a heap of kit bashing, mixing both Warhammer Age of Sigmar and 40k kits that make sense. And and I'm about to start learning how to green stuff, because I want to start making cloaks on the Thunderstrike armor.
Oh, that's gonna look nice.
That would look sick.
That would be sick.
I want to start doing that for the Stormdrake Guard, actually. Give them 4 cloaks.
A lot of cool customization you can do. And Games Workshop sell a lot of cool stuff as well through Forge World, alternative shields, alternative heads, if you're not confident in sculpting.
I wish they did more of that stuff. I wish Forge World was just dedicated to making cosmetic upgrades for pretty much every faction, because they're at their best when they do that, and they don't do enough of that.
Oh, agree.
All right, last thing. Pick one unit as your favorite Stormcast unit. And we'll start with James.
Navigators on Draculines.
I knew you would say that.
Kitty cats.
And we'll go counterclockwise to Coach next.
Me. Look, I'm a Timmy, so dragons. But I've really enjoyed the Stormcast Chariot. That is a really, really cool model. So while it wouldn't be my favorite, dragons clearly my favorite, I've got to shout out the Chariot. The Chariot's just boss.
Mergonk, what about you, man? Pick one favorite.
Evocators on foot. I had a joy building and painting them.
That's a
They
great
got
kit.
so much character. Cloaks all the way, magic staffs, balls of energy coming across, swords. It's just got everything.
Yeah, for sure, man. That kit is phenomenal. I love how much variety there is in it, and it's such a pain that.
And it's a perfect mix because I hate painting like it's got like I think there's like 2 female, 3 female, 2 male. I like a mix of having different things to paint, different proportions and whatever.
It gets boring painting the same size like tree trunk legs over and over and over. I'm painting up a squad of Judicators right now. It's awful.
I really wish we had female Liberators outside of the special edition. I think Larissa Shadowstalker, that's what her name is, and Angara Bright Shield from the Underworld's Warband. I wish we had like dedicated female Liberator sculpts inside those boxes.
That would be great.
But we get Vindictors now, so it's fine.
The Vindictors have phenomenal proportioning. I really, really like it. They just nailed that. For me, my favorite's Celestin Prime. Easy. He's got the wings. He's got that sweet celestial orrery that's so iconic. The huge cloak that it turns into, just the way it transitions in there is just phenomenal. That's definitely my favorite Stormcast model. Probably my favorite model of all time. Big fan of Celestin Prime.
Yeah, sweet looking models.
Okay, and that about wraps it up. Let's see what chat's favorite model is here.
I was going to say, like the YouTube thing at this particular point is to tell everybody, if they've listened to this much of the show, is to make sure in the comment section to let us know what their favorite model is and why.
See, that's why we bring you on, man. We don't know all this YouTube secrets.
Honestly, I think with a roster as deep as the Stormcast, there's a lot of cool characters. Gav Shawheart, for example, wonderful character. Some of the new kits that are coming out in the anniversary, like the is it Silas with the Beastman head it's holding.
Silent Beastman, yes, yeah.
There's just so many cool models. Like Larissa, you mentioned. I can't wait to build Larissa. She's a wonderful kit. Indrasa is just an extraordinary model. I think you're very as somebody.
There's a Liberator. I can't remember, with a Grand Hammer with an Orc head below it. It's a limited edition model.
The dude with the double hammer, like the massive
he's like
Grand
standing
hammer.
like this. Like he has a cloak on his back, like a fur cloak, and there's a dead Orc at his feet. It's like, oh god, I really want that model.
As somebody who has collected and owns about 7 or 8 different armies, Stormcast fans, you have no idea how lucky you are with the types of sculpts, the range, and the ability to just have the flexibility to jump around your book. Like it's a great place to start, and that's being genuine. It's what ultimately drew me into the army.
Oh yeah, we are spoiled for choices. It is a good time to be a Stormcast player, for sure. Let's see here. Chase is saying Vandus Hammerhand. It's a good pick. Vandus is very, very iconic. Love that model. Noah's a big sucker for Celestin Prime. Attaboy. It's the right choice.
Prosecutors. David likes prosecutors.
The wings, man.
Very good models.
Those first edition wings were my favorite thing about Stormcast. I really hope we don't see only Andrasta style feathered wings going forward. I really hope we get back to that Art Deco style. I love it. It's so good.
It's funny because I actually converted my Knight Azeroth to have angelic wings. So I'm like your complete yin to the yang. So you're like, I love the helmets, and I'm like, I hate the helmets.
They're so fragile. I just don't. That's why I don't like them.
It's so annoying. I drew from a lot of the Sisters of the Battle because they have like a lot of cool angelic and wonderful kits as well. But it's great that there's options.
Let me ask you this. If you guys had to pick one new Thunderstrike model, and it can't be the Drakes. We know how much everyone loves the Drakes. But if you had to pick a new Thunderstrike that's not a dragon, what's your favorite model?
The Lord Imperatant.
Okay.
I think he looks like an actual commander. Like the Celestant, the Lord Celestant on foot from first edition, he looks fine. Like he just looks like a tankier Retributor with a small cloak on him. But the Lord Imperatant looks with the cloak and the Gryph-hound with the Gryph at his feet, with the armor, with the chains and the ropes and the little dagger. Oh, phenomenal model.
Oh yeah, he definitely looks like a guy who's commanding the battle, not necessarily participating in it, but he's off overseeing it. Yeah. My pick's got to be Bastion. I think Bastion just nails the Thunderstrike concept, takes it to its logical conclusion, and looks so freaking good. I think that is the best Thunderstrike model.
Mhm.
James?
I'm going to ape you here, Coach. I like the Chariots as my favorite Thunderstrike model.
And to be different, I converted my Lord Relictor from a Knight Relictor. And I really enjoyed the Knight Relictor model. It's a very cool model. And there's a lot of conversion opportunities to make it unique as well. So
Yeah.
big fan of that one.
Honorable
It looks
mention
like-
is the Vexler with Apotheosis banner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was,
That's
I don't know
I was
why
an idiot.
Oh, they nailed that. They nailed the aesthetic on that one. I love that model.
the
Like,
pose.
yeah.
His pose is so good.
Yes.
I mean, if we're
So
talking
I wouldn't mind
poses,
putting
you've
him in with a
got
Vanquisher unit.
Gardas.
Gardas is pretty sick.
But he's technically old cast. Technically.
He's the last of the old cast. Getting a lot of love in the chat for Bastion. Mark's shouting out Vanguard Hunters. Oh man, I forgot about Vanguard Hunters. They're so good. You wouldn't think Paladin Rangers would work well together, like fusing those two concepts, but Vanguard Hunters are so good, man. Yeah, a lot of love for Bastion, the banner guy.
Yeah, good old banner guy. He's so great.
Our chat has really good taste. Okay, thank you everybody for tuning in. Hopefully this has been useful. Hopefully we've created something here that some of it will date, obviously, like when we talk about specific units, that's going to get dated. But hopefully there's a lot of good advice in here that people can come back to later or reference people. That's really what we were trying to create here with this roundtable discussion. Really quickly, just going to go over our future projects. We've got a bunch of videos coming up. A lot of them are waiting for the winter update. Don't want to go into too much detail about that because it'll come when it comes, and then we'll be releasing new videos about that. Hobby Hangouts. James, you want to quickly shout out what times we're doing Hobby Hangouts?
Yep. So again, all Eastern time, Wednesday 7 to 10 p.m. for the North American crowd, Saturday morning 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. for the European crowd, and Saturday evenings 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern for the Aussies.
Right on. They're a lot of fun, and with things the way they are in the world, it's good to just have some people to share a hobby with. So feel free to drop in on our server, on anybody's server. Honestly, just socialize, talk to people.
Yep.
It's important for you. On that topic, we are doing our first painting contest. It's the Knight Relictor, partially because we needed an excuse to paint ours, but also because I actually do think it's just a cool model. So starting from December 26th until January 16th, there's going to be a new channel on our Discord. You can drop in pictures of your Knight Relictor there. The Stormkeep guys are going to pick a winner, and they're going to get a prize of Vanquishers, Vindictors, Vigilors, or Annihilators. Should say Annihilators on this slide. Battle reports, still working on it. I'm going to be posting some pictures of the space that we're making for it on the Discord. And if you want to support us on that, visit us on Patreon. Consider tossing a couple bucks our way. Big shout out to Coach for joining us on this live stream. It's been a lot of fun, man. I really hope we get to do this again sometime soon. Maybe.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, maybe when I start a Cities of Sigmar army, I'll come to your channel.
Good luck.
Hey, I'm
Good luck
waiting on the Dawnbringer. Yeah, waiting on the Dawnbringer Crusades to show up because that is a rumored faction. I'll be looking at them very closely.
I think you'll be waiting till 2023, but until then, I didn't actually show this off yet. So
Ghal Maraz.
Can you get the full thing in this camera? Oh, that is sick.
Oh, that is sick.
So where can I get one?
That'll be me role playing the Celestin Prime or something. But
oh, geez, I don't even want to know how you're going to get up on the tippy tops of your little cloak there and float around. Just going to have some people carrying you around.
Yeah, just levitate. You know how it is.
Oh, I forgot I could do that. All right.
No, but choose the invite. If people want to chat, see me as well, like you obviously know that I've got a channel, but make sure to subscribe to the Stormkeep and more importantly, join the Discord as well. You guys are doing great work when it comes to Stormcast related content. And if people are worried about making the wrong purchase or trying to, get through the things that we all went through at some point to learn the hobby, you've got a wealth of information at the Stormkeep. So, take this opportunity to join.
Yeah, and big shout out to you, man. I love the interviews you're doing, not just for Stormcast, but you do a lot of quality content, and I love your channel. So it was really great having you on here. Really appreciate you coming on. And Morgant, James, you guys have been great too. Thank you, everybody who, if there's some European out there watching us this late, shout out to you in particular for staying up this late. But otherwise, everybody have a great night or a great day if you're in Australia. Take care.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Take care, guys.
Whew, that's it.